I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right, all right. Happy Thursday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I do want to go ahead and get right in. I don't want to keep our guests waiting. So tonight we are talking to former Seattle City Councilor Kshama Sawant and former Green Party presidential candidate Dr. Jill Stein. Let's go ahead and bring them in one at a time here. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Sabby.
How are both of you? Welcome back.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So this is the first time I've had both of you on the show at the same time. So this should be pretty interesting. I guess I want to get started with this past presidential election. Both of you collaborated here for Jill's presidential campaign. And Kshama, I know that you usually handle things on the labor front, but you were also a city councilor for Seattle as well. And for those who are not aware, Kshama Sawant started as an activist. Like, you were on the ground fighting for the Fight for 15, et cetera, through Socialist Alternative. And then later on, you became a city councilor. So Kshama has experience working on the local level. Jill has run on the local level and the presidential level. With this particular campaign, I think there was something different this time around with this presidential election. Number one, it wasn't a normal presidential election. We had the incumbent president drop out of the race pretty close to the election. And of course, Kamala Harris was chosen to be the nominee. There wasn't a Democrat primary. There were people that had issues with that. So there was a lot of things that was going on. And then you have a former president running again, which was Donald Trump, who ended up winning the presidential election. The big thing that people have been talking about is the voter turnout. There were about 8 million people, I think the number is now, that they said that stayed home. And that's what I want to hear from both of you. On the campaign trail, Jill and Kshama, what were some of the things that you heard from voters? I know both of you were in Michigan together, I believe, at one point, and I think Seattle. What were some of the things that you heard from voters about this particular election?
Well, first, let me just say that it was several million more who stayed home than in 2020. But in 2020, remember, 1 out of every 3 eligible voters stayed home. And these are predominantly younger, of color, working people, lower income. So it's like the people who are being shut out of the political system are voting with their feet. So there was by no means here, a mandate for Donald Trump, which he's trying to claim right now. There's very much a mandate to change the system because so many people are just tired of being thrown under the bus. And I'll just say in brief, that's what we heard over and over again, that people are outraged. They are sick of the struggle. The fight back that you see in the support for Luigi Mangione and his assassinating a healthcare CEO, the support for that just reflects how utterly desperate people are about our health care, about our housing. 1 out of every 2 Americans is struggling to keep a roof over their heads. Some 70,000 roughly deaths every year just from the lack of health insurance, abysmal health statistics. 100 million people who are struggling to get out of healthcare debt, student debt, 40 million. It's a litany of absolute desperate struggles while we're witnessing this, partying on steroids, these elites who are grabbing more and more wealth and resources for themselves and their influence over government. And this was, and not to mention the war machine, which consumes half of our congressional tax dollars, more than half, actually. So our dollars are being spent not on our benefit, and people are struggling to survive and are looking at candidates being rammed down our throats by the corporate media, which is telling us that we are powerless, we don't count, and that resistance is futile. So what we heard from people was just such fight back and such gratitude that they were able to find us despite the mainstream media machine essentially conducting wall-to-wall propaganda and pulling out all the stops to silence us, to throw us off the ballot, to deny our right to debates, to understand who the candidates are, and to have candidates on the ballot that represent us. So we really heard over and over that there is a rebellion in full swing, and it's ready to go. And I think it's more ready than ever. Kshama, I'll turn it over to you to say a few words.
Yeah, I think that the cost of living crisis and the war, the genocide on the Palestinian people in Gaza, and also now the violence in the West Bank and Lebanon were very much issues that we encountered. And in fact, there is no disconnect between what we observed anecdotally and what the polls are confirming statistically. We saw the new poll, the YouGov poll that came out recently, which said that, and it's a damning poll, it shows that Harris's refusal to break from Biden's support of the genocide might actually have cost her the election. I mean, we know this in terms of just having a finger on the pulse of consciousness, but this is now a statistical poll that is affirming that. The poll says that among the 19 million people who voted for Biden in 2020, but then didn't vote last year, nearly a third of those people named the genocide in Gaza as the top reason over economy and immigration, the main reason that is for refusing to vote at all. And of course, what we also saw on the ground that was that a lot of people who were angry about the genocide and the war, and also the war on in the proxy war being carried out in Ukraine, they were also angry about the cost of living. It's not like they were all disconnected. A lot of people I personally spoke to, for example, on the ground in Michigan, were working class and middle class Arab and Muslim people, people with children, with their families. They were all there together at the mosques, and they would say that I'm also having a hard time paying my rent and buying food for my children. So it's not like those issues are disconnected for a lot of people. And I think one of the most crucial things I should mention from our experience, especially in Dearborn, but also elsewhere where we were campaigning. I mean, I'm sure many of your viewers might know that Workers Strike Back, my organization, we not only had a democratic discussion and debate and endorsed Jill Stein as the most important anti-war candidate for president, we also campaigned both in Seattle and in Kansas City and other cities like Boston. But primarily in Dearborn, we had many of our members, including myself, give up our lives for weeks at a time and go to Dearborn, which was really crucial. And there, what one of the things we saw again and again, the theme was not so much that they had to be talked out of voting for Kamala Harris, because the anger against the genocide was so palpable. It was so alive and all pervasive. What we did actually do was talk a lot of people in Dearborn out of not voting at all, like just being passive and convincing them that being individualistic in their anger is not going to yield any results. Not that we're claiming that just voting for Jill Stein is the end of the road, but that building the highest possible vote for Jill Stein was going to be part and parcel of a movement that we need to continue building, an anti-war working class movement. And some of the people we talked out of voting for Trump and explaining to them that Trump is a con man. He poses as a peace candidate, but ultimately he represents, in his own way, he may be less predictable of a defender of imperialist interests like Kamala Harris than Kamala Harris, but at the end of the day, he does ultimately very much represent imperialism and US capitalism, and that we can't have illusions in either of them. And I really agree with Jill on pinpointing the issue of healthcare as one of the most pivotal, if not the most pivotal issue that's emerging, and that I think can provide a real ground for organizing. And that's why, I know we're going to be talking about this, but at the organizing conference that Workers Strike Back and I are hosting in Seattle in February, we want to bring forward the question of Medicare for all and really fighting for it at the local level. But most importantly, what kind of movement we'll need for that.
Very, very important points there. And I think that is really interesting. I'm not sure if both of you are familiar with Irony, also known as the Funky Academic, after Donald Trump won. And I think it was immediately after the Luigi incident. Irony said on his show that we need a new third party, and that party needs to run on healthcare. That was his idea about it. And I totally get where he's coming from about that. Now, of course, once again, Jill, you're familiar with this. People are blaming Jill Stein for the reason why Donald Trump won again. But I don't know if you guys saw this, but Jessica Burbank, and she's been on the show recently, she's been looking at the data here, and she said, I'll say it again, even if Kamala Harris got every vote cast for Jill Stein, Claudia De La Cruz, and Cornel West, she would not have won any of the swing states. And I think, thank you so much, Jessica, for putting this together. But I think this is important for people to see, because for the people who say it's Jill Stein's fault, it's Dr. West's fault, it's Claudia's fault, or whatever, it's third parties. When you look at the numbers, that is not the case. For example, you can see in Arizona, even with the third party candidates in the race, it shows here that Kamala Harris still would have needed over 169,000 votes in Arizona. So ultimately, it was the people who just did not turn out at all. It was the people who stayed home. And to that, I blame the Democratic Party. It is up to you to excite your base and to get them to come out. One of the questions that I do have, I know the Green Party's goal was to get to the 5%. That didn't happen. I know that's not easy to do. But Jill, can you explain to everyone, because I think this is one of the bigger questions a lot of people are hearing after the presidential campaign. Why is it that in 2016, you got more support? And I think my answer to this is, I'm assuming the town hall. A lot of people forget, but when Jill ran in 2016, CNN gave her a town hall. That didn't happen this time around, right? So that could be part of it. But why do you think you received more support in 2016 than this time around for 2024?
In 2016, there was not a war room that was being funded, with a six-figure budget and with as many staffers as we had in our entire campaign. The Democrats had a war room for the specific purpose of smearing us, of silencing us. When we went to do an interview with Tavis Smiley, he greeted me saying that he had been contacted by someone from the DNC the night before, because they were studying where we were going to be interviewed, and they were then feeding smear questions and smear campaigns to the interviewers, like Tavis Smiley. There was the Democrats were pulling out all the stops. They had hired what they called an army of lawyers to throw us off the ballot. So we had less ballot access than we did in 2016. They hung on to our matching funds, our public funds, so that we would miss certain deadlines. We needed that money, and they refused to give it to us until after the ballot deadlines had already passed, so that we effectively couldn't use the public funding that we had earned. And they also advertised publicly for basically infiltrators and spies and people to manage them. So I think the Democrats were running really scared because they know that their candidates did not have support. They know that they have basically thrown working people under the bus. So they have lost their base between NAFTA, between the Wall Street bailouts, between throwing out millions upon millions of homeowners in 2008 with the Wall Street crash, between the 1996 crime bill and its incredibly horrific impact on communities of color. They know that they have lost their base. And so that, they've abandoned their advocacy for the migrant community. They have adopted the talking points of Republicans. They've contributed to the outright lies against migrants, saying that migrants are a source of violence and a source of drugs coming over the border. All of that is absolutely false. It's the opposite of what is true. Migrants actually make our communities safer, and it is the red-blooded Americans who are bringing drugs over across the border, not migrants. So the Democrats are very scared for good reason, because they have abandoned working people and big money, which we're seeing on such flagrant display right now, with the billionaire class sitting right up there at the podium with Donald Trump. That's going on in the Democrats as well. And they have very much participated in opening the floodgates to bigger money than ever. Elon Musk put $250 million, more than that actually, into Donald Trump's campaign. But the Democrats, they had their own version of that. Most of their money was also coming. They had more billionaires contributing to their campaign than ever before. So Democrats have participated, have been a major driver in the sellout of our political system and the sellout of working people. So they cannot dare to actually face us in the court of public opinion. And their only recourse is to try to silence us, to create fear campaigns and smear campaigns. I think that explains what happened. But then, you saw that with all of the grassroots political campaigns. They were all driven down in their numbers. But within that context, as Greens, we came out in the number one position for grassroots campaigns. So it is all of us. It is our democracy. It is everyday people who are being silenced and shut down by this political system. But within that very repressive system, relatively speaking, we're on a roll. And we know that it wasn't that people rejected our campaign. They never had a chance to even hear about it. And if you looked at the comments on the Breakfast Club, where so many in the young African-American community were hearing from Butch Ware and myself for the first time, the comments, 20,000 of them and counting, basically said, oh my God, I wasn't going to vote in this election. Now I'm not only going to vote, I'm going out to register green. And that put the fear, holy terror into the Democrats' mind. And that's when they actually started conducting an advertising campaign against a third party campaign for the first time ever. They actually felt compelled to spend money, not only on their army of lawyers and their war room to smear us, but also then to advertise on mainstream media to try to shut us down. So, I think people are continuing to learn lessons right now about where this political system is taking us. So, I think it's not only 1 out of every 3 voters who's voting with their feet by saying, I will not support either of these corporate powered candidates and their parties that are being rammed down our throats, these billionaire parties. We're not voting for them, but people are really ready to get out and start organizing now. And that's what we're going to do at this conference. And we encourage people to, come out, to sign up, come out and be a part of it. You can attend virtually. You can also attend in person. So, this is, as Alice Walker said, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. This is about recognizing that power and actually getting organized to use it, because that's the only thing standing in the way of us and really moving forward. Donald Trump is so, what should we say, just horrifically overconfident right now in what he thinks he's doing. In his inauguration speech, he didn't have a word to say about everyday people and working people and the crises in our lives. He had absolutely nothing to say about it, and bashing immigrants is not going to make life better for anybody, not only the immigrant community, but everybody else who depends on migrants for our food, for our small businesses, for our restaurants. There are so many critical, for construction. The American economy is going to really tank in a very big way with the policies that Donald Trump is in the process of implementing right now. So expect this rebellion to grow very big and very fast.
Thank you so much for saying that, Jill. There is something I do want to show everybody. Immigration was a very, very hot topic this presidential election cycle. Doesn't mean it hasn't been brought up in presidential elections. It has, but this particular one, it was a big issue, and not just for people on the right. There were also people that were Democrats or former Democrats that also, particularly from the Black American community, that were also vocal and upset in cities like Chicago, New York, also here in Boston as well. They were not happy with the decisions that were made by the Biden-Harris administration or some of their local politicians and some of the things that they were giving to migrant communities. So that was also another issue. But in reference to the mass deportations, I want everyone to see this because there was a farmer that was interviewed recently who supported Trump and still supports Trump, a South Dakota dairy farmer. He's going to tell you about what's going to happen to the food. Everyone listen to this. This is important.
What percentage of your workers are not U.S. born?
Probably half.
About half?
Yeah.
How many hours does this go on?
It's 24 hours a day. We could milk 8 hours a day, but it wouldn't be feasible or profitable for us to produce milk.
So you need workers like this year round?
Yes. Yes.
Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota, her farm is just a few miles away. This farmer who voted for her, who voted for Trump, who still supports them, doesn't believe that they would round up immigrants and ask them for their immigration status because it's an open secret that farms in this state are held up by undocumented workers. Are you worried, like some of your other farmers, that if there were a mass roundup of undocumented migrants, that you might lose workers? You might not have enough workers.
Well, the question I asked, how are they going to do that? Within 2 days, we will not have food. There will not be food anywhere.
2 days?
Yes. That's why I predict nobody will be filling the shelves, nobody will be producing food. If we once have to shut down and be gone, it's never coming back.
Does Governor Noem understand that?
I would think so.
You have a lot of faith that they're not going to do what they're saying.
That's pretty much what I'm thinking. So we have to trust in our officials that are put in place.
So he doesn't think that it's going to happen. I have already seen some deportations taking place today. I've seen video footage of that. They were here in Boston earlier today. But I think the point that Jill points to, and Professor Richard Wolff pointed to this as well. And when you tell people this, people will say, well, they can give Americans those jobs. But the problem is those farmers are not going to pay you. They're not going to pay you minimum wage. Number one, they're not even going to pay you $7.25 an hour. They're not paying them that. So I think that's a big part of the problem, that people, whenever you talk about some type of big change like that, there has to be something that is set up in place to deal with that impact. And there isn't anything set up in place right now. A lot of people don't talk about that, but sometimes when you make these type of decisions, there isn't that other thought of, okay, well, what's going to happen after something? What happens with the food, right? That's the big one, I think, for people is food, because we all need food. So that's a really important part there. But the new initiative that both of you are working on, I want to pivot to Kshama here, because a lot of people said, what happens now after that election? And this is pretty huge. This is the February 2025 organizing conference, Fight the Rich and Their Two Parties in the Wars, Fight Trump, $25 an hour minimum wage. Jill Stein, Chris Hedges also is going to be a part of this. and of course, Kshama Sawant. Kshama, I want to pivot to you to hear a little bit about this. It's scheduled for Seattle, Washington, Saturday, February 22nd. Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry. Go ahead.
This organizing conference really is the only effort that I know of. And in that sense, it is historic. It is going to be historic because it is a demonstration of the kind of leadership that working people's movements and the anti-war movement desperately needs, but is completely absent. And I'm glad you mentioned that Chris Hedges will be there as well. I mean, look, you're talking about immigration. So I think the way to frame this is along class lines. Trump represents the billionaire class. So he is not going to take up policies that are going to hurt the bottom line of the billionaire class or be in antagonism to their endless greed. But what he will do, and we should be aware of this, we should not have blinders on about this, is he will actually wreak havoc on the lives of countless immigrant families, undocumented immigrants, and also immigrants in general will feel the dread, and families will be broken apart. And it's not going to be anything new. Obama, Democratic President Obama, was the deporter in chief. He still remains the deporter in chief. After that, Trump came on. He brought the Muslim ban. He attempted to do that. In fact, we socialists and union members actually shut down the SeaTac airport here, and that was part of the defiance that forced him to track back on that. But then you had Biden also be very hostile to immigrants, and now you have Trump 2.0. So in other words, what you have is a continuum of these presidents, an endless parade of presidents, an endless parade of bureaucrats, Congress members, senators, House members, state representatives, local representatives of the Democratic and Republican parties, both representing the interests and the greed of capitalism, regardless of whatever rhetorical differences they might have. I mean, look at Biden's record. He betrayed on his promises for $15 an hour. He talked about the public option for healthcare in his campaign trail, and the moment he was inaugurated, there was not a mention of that at all. He broke the railroad workers' strike. He had pro-climate rhetoric and then became one of the historic expanders of fossil fuel. And let's not forget Obama. After he left office, Obama boasted about being a good friend to oil and gas. He literally said, that oil and gas expansion, that was me, guys. Don't forget that, people. That was literally what he said. And so you have on issue after issue, whether it is healthcare, minimum wage, climate, immigration, justice, any of these issues, what you see is both Democrats and Republicans completely betraying working class people and, thoroughly representing the capitalist state. And you have what you have had since 2016. I mean, your earlier question was also about, what happened in 2024 in comparison to 2016 and 2020. And I think the question of Bernie, as Jill mentioned, is extremely crucial. We had Bernie Sanders' campaign at that time. Remember, there was tens of millions of people energized by the call to tax Wall Street for Medicare for all, $15 an hour. And what happened? Bernie ended up capitulating to the Democratic Party, ended up endorsing Hillary Clinton, and then that ushered in Trump 1.0. And then Bernie's selling out went on and on and on. And then it sort of reached the depths of shamelessness where he, within hours of Biden declaring his re-election campaign, Bernie Sanders endorsed him uncritically, and then he endorsed Kamala Harris. You had AOC go on the DNC floor in Chicago and shout about how Harris was supposedly working tirelessly for a ceasefire. All of this betrayal is at the root of what has happened, where millions ended up staying home rather than vote. And so, in other words, these betrayals have truly damaged the left. They have damaged working people, and we need to have an alternate strategy. Our task now as working people is to get organized independently of the Democrats, independently of misleaders like Sanders and AOC. And let's not forget the labor movement leadership as well. You had Sean Fain, the leader of the Auto Workers Union, UAW, go and cheerlead Harris at the DNC floor. And then now, just days ago, he has an op-ed in the Washington Post saying he is ready to work with Trump. These are misleaders in the labor movement. You have the same in the NGO movement, the BLM misleaders who sold out the George Floyd rebellion. So again, you have a capitalism, which is a system which exploits billions of people and enriches a few at the top. That system is not going to be able to do what it does if it was just a few billionaires carrying out the agenda. You know, the reason the billionaires' agenda has been intact for so many decades is because they have a whole host of defenders in various forms. You have the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and it suits them for people to be oscillating between these two parties, ultimately just representing capitalism, but looking different, sounding different. It suits the interest of capitalism to have labor leadership and NGO leadership who sound like us. Sometimes they sound angry like us, meaning like working people, but then ultimately also end up carrying out what I would call business unionism, which is, again, not directly representing the interests of capitalism, but acting as a gatekeeper against working people's movements, preventing a militant rank and file uprising in the union movement. So all of this is happening. And the only way to come out of this is to build independent working class movements and explaining that we need to fight the rich. That's why the theme of this organizing conference is working class people need to fight the rich. And I have no doubt in my mind that there is hunger for this. I don't feel despair that people are not willing to fight. What's missing is the strategy for fight back. And that's what this conference is about.
Well said there. And for people just joining again, new rally happening February 2025, organizing conference, Fight the Rich in their two parties in the wars, fight Trump, $25 hour minimum wage. This will be Jill Stein, Chris Hedges, Kshama Sawant in Seattle, Washington, Saturday, February 22nd, 10 a.m. PT. Is this going to be streamed, Kshama?
Yes, it will be live streamed as well. And if you're watching this and you are in the Seattle area, even as far as Portland, Oregon, or if you're in Vancouver, BC, we want you to come and join us. If you're able to drive here, please come. If not, watch it online.
This is the type of movement that someone like Bernie Sanders should have been a part of, right? Because Bernie was talking about the corruption, the corporate greed, the billionaires, right? But he's still trying to work with that Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders just voted for Marco Rubio, you guys. I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but Marco Rubio is one of the politicians that Donald Trump chose to be a part of his team here. And Marco Rubio was up for Secretary of State. He is a very staunch Zionist. He was very rude toward the pro-Palestinian protesters. This is what you're getting for Secretary of State. If you thought Blinken was something, here we go with Marco Rubio. And Bernie voted for him. By the way, Marco Rubio would have won anyway because it was 100% of the Senate vote. So Bernie did not have to vote for him. Nathan Robinson from Current Affairs said that he reached out to Bernie's team and he said there's no response or comment as to why he decided to do that. So you guys see what's happening with these parties? So one of the things that it mentions here for the organizing conference, it says we need to use our momentum from getting out the vote for Jill Stein anti-war pro-worker campaign to fight the rich in their two parties, to end the wars and the genocide in Gaza, to fight against racism, sexism, and all forms of oppression, to organize protests and strike actions to win a $25 hour minimum wage, Medicare for all, quality, affordable housing, and good union jobs for all. And I like this part here. It says both Democrats and Republicans are dead in for workers, the union movement, and the anti-war struggle. And I think we've all seen this over the past couple of years. And one of the things that I've noticed as well, and I'm so glad that you're doing this conference, because what we saw happen, and I'll pivot to you, Jill, a lot of people were frustrated with Biden-Harris presidency because of a lot of economic reasons, but also, of course, because of the genocide in Gaza. And ultimately what happened is that most of those people decided to stay at home. Some of them voted for you or Dr. West or Claudia de la Cruz, but some of them pivoted to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. There are a number of people that I met that voted for Trump on economic issues alone. And I don't know why they think that, whatever, but they swung in the other direction. And this is typically, I think, what happens when you have when you have a movement that like Bernie Sanders had, talking about these populist issues, talking about Medicare for all and increasing the minimum wage, et cetera, and you get that much energy behind it, then when you see those people say, nope, let's just try to work within the Democratic Party and push Joe Biden left, and you see these things don't happen, they don't come into fruition. It has been since 2016. Ultimately, what's going to happen is some people are just going to check out completely, which I think we saw that with the turnout. But then also some people swing all the way over in the other direction because they think, well, the populism on the left failed, so I'm going to go to the populism on the right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people get swayed by Trump's rhetoric, his rhetoric, his big push to the Arab American community and the Muslim community in Dearborn and in Michigan and beyond, saying that, that he was going to be a peacemaker, that he would respect. I don't even remember what his pitch was, but it was, a totally empty, scary, vacuous pitch. And what is he talking about now? What great real estate property Gaza would be, how it needs to be made into something, So you don't want to trust this guy further than you can throw him, and you can't throw him very far. So he had that kind of pitch. We met people out on the campaign trail, Hispanics, who were going to vote for Trump, as many did, because, I said, well, why? Why were you going to vote for Trump? And they said, well, because the deportations were much worse under Biden than they were under Trump, so in spite of the rhetoric and the reputations, likewise, many youth were just swayed. Trump was, the Democrats have done a great job of making Trump look like he is standing up for free speech. In his inaugural comments, he was going to shut down censorship. Yeah, like censorship of who exactly? And let's see you support the free speech rights of Students for Justice in Palestine and, for the campus encampments against genocide. Let's see how much free speech is supported there, and it's just his support for TikTok, because the Democrats wanted to shut down TikTok so that we wouldn't be influenced by China, and we've seen how far that went now, because all these people have gone over to Red Note and are loving what they are learning about China and how reasonable life is and how incredibly, supportive life and institutions are there. People don't have to work 2 jobs. They actually have health care. They can call an ambulance, and not pay $5,000. In fact, the ambulance will come for free. So at any rate, Trump is being made to look like a good guy by how terrible the Democrats are. And Trump has all the billionaires, the richest billionaires lined up behind him, but Kamala Harris had more billionaires than ever behind her campaign. So,
right.
I think, just if I can just add, I think that just it's sort of your question, Sabby, it relates to what you were talking about earlier in terms of the Bernie Sanders campaigns. Because in 2016 there had been a groundswell of support around Bernie Sanders and the demands he raised, and because he capitulated to Democrats afterwards, what ended up happening is that a lot of the working class people who wanted a fight back, who would have supported Bernie, ended up being left with sort of, no political home, so to say. And you can see the real, how palpable this was, right? Think about West Virginia in 2016 in the primaries. I believe Bernie Sanders won the Democratic primary there, and Donald Trump won the primary there, Republican primary, and then he won West Virginia in the general election. The point being that this is a state where you would be tempted to, you meaning the Democratic Party is, has written off as this is the red state. These are the deplorables, the basket of deplorables, as Hillary Clinton called it, and then you had other variations of it emerging last year, derogatory terminology about poor and working class white people. And what did we see there? We saw an enormous opening for the kind of progressive demands that we are talking about, which is higher minimum wage. I mean, we're calling for $25 an hour right now when workers strike back, but Bernie was calling for $15 an hour. That had huge support. Medicare for all had enormous support. The support for Medicare for all has only grown. And but because of those betrayals, because of the Sanders and AOC and all these characters completely bending to the Democratic Party, the labor leadership failing at the same time to show any leadership, and again going along cheerleading the Democratic Party, then you had working people who felt completely sold out, ended up voting for Trump. But I think we should also be careful to not overstate it, in the sense that most people, and this goes to what you were saying at the very beginning of the show, most people who were angry at Bernie, the squad, and the Democratic Party as a whole just didn't vote. It's not that most people voted for Trump. Most people just stayed out. And I would say both on that count, and both in that and the support that Bernie Sanders got for his demands earlier on, we should draw a lot of hope that if we have class-based campaigns where we can win over working people on the basis of a joint fight back for the kinds of demands that Workers' Strike Back is talking about, I have no doubt that we can build united movements where you can this sort of divide between people who voted, working class people who voted for Trump, and working class people who didn't vote at all, or even ended up voting for the Democratic Party. I think many of them are also angry, though many of them just held their nose and voted for the Democrats anyway, because they feel like there was no other option. And as Jill said, many didn't know about Jill Stein's campaigns because of all the attacks and the silencing by the Democratic Party. And so we have a chance and also a duty to expose that, Hillary Clinton's comment of deplorables, Biden's comments calling working people garbage, that all of this shows that people are understanding what the Democratic Party is, that it's a party of the elite, and working people are correctly angry. And it's not just the words they use, it's their policies show that they don't care about working people, not to mention the question of the climate crisis. And so all of this demands that we provide an independent avenue, and that's not going to happen from this existing leadership of these movements. We have to build new leadership from the working class.
Well said. Go ahead, Jill.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say that what we really want to do at this conference is help people connect at the level of their communities, and to conduct these campaigns at the level of their communities. And so whether it is fighting for a Medicare for all referendum, which might happen in Washington state, or whether it is fighting for a divestment campaign in your community, getting a resolution through your city council, not only to support a ceasefire in Gaza, which is tenuous at best, but also to actually divest. And there are really exciting examples now. For example, in Alameda County in California, where a coalition of progressive groups basically just got through the adoption of a divestment from Caterpillar, divesting $12 million with another $20 million to go, to basically withdraw funding from corporations that are benefiting from the war and from genocide and apartheid, to support the students at campuses in your community who are fighting back, but who are, being pummeled, who are being threatened with expulsion. Here, you may know, Sabby, about the MIT students who exposed the horrific research going on, which is actually sponsored by the Knesset. The research is genocidal research, and its terrifying impacts go way beyond Israel and Gaza and the genocide. They're doing breakthrough basic research that will enable drones to swarm. So instead of being pursued by one drone, you will then be pursued by a whole army of drones. It could be hundreds or thousands of drones that effectively create a drone army. And the same thing for bots, like these terrifying robotic dogs that come out, and they're not widely used yet, but they could be. And so MIT is doing that breakthrough research, and these heroic, courageous students have really put themselves at risk to expose it, and they deserve to be supported, and for there to be a campaign to achieve this goal of getting MIT to divest. So at any rate, we encourage people to come to the conference for us to be able to share prototypes, to share resources around specific campaigns that so many of us could use in our communities to actually help advance the struggle. Because it's really clear, as Kshama has said, this is about the billionaires and their political parties that have sold out to them. They are not going to do what they need to do just for asking nicely. This is about removing them from power. And in the meantime, it's about taking action with traction. And that includes strikes, supporting workers' strikes in our communities, developing our capacity as communities to support the strikes, to have, to develop strike funds and mutual aid and the kind of things that we need to be able to do to support strikes. And it's both for the sake of workers and their contract negotiations or getting recognition for local unions. But it's also about the work that we then have to do together on these other issues. We need to be able to move beyond asking nicely, beyond this concept of lobbying and political threats, which we need political threats, but we also need action. We need to be able to actually pass divestment campaigns. We need to be able to exercise economic boycotts in conjunction with strikes and really assert our power. As Malcolm X said, it's not that we're outnumbered, we're just out-organized. So this is about sharing that power of organizing.
I agree 100%. Kshama, I want to come to you about healthcare, because this is another thing. I wrote an article about this recently about the Luigi situation, and that obviously you can see there's an outcry from people in the United States on different sides of the political aisle that have very, very big issues with the healthcare system in this country, and they've been affected one way or another, or someone close to them has been impacted by the healthcare system in this country. So if one were to ask, particularly with this movement, like with the worker movement, how would we accomplish Medicare for all if it's not done through Congress? What would be a strategy that you would have for that?
Yeah, this is a pivotal question. I'm so glad you're asking that. And I want to weigh in on that. But since Jill brought this up, I thought it's really important for me to just say that I concur with her points about having solidarity with the courageous students on various campuses who have been taking on personal sacrifice of various kinds, quoting arrest records, the chances of expulsions, and certainly the mass numbers of suspensions in building an anti-war movement. It's very important that we stand in solidarity with them. And if any of those students are watching right now, I want to let them know that Workers Strike Back and I stand with them 100%. And specifically, I wanted to mention these two students who were recently interviewed by Chris Hedges, Prahlad Iyengar and Richard Solomon, who both MIT PhD students. And, Prahlad was talking about how MIT is basically getting ready to expel him. And so these are just draconian consequences that are being meted out to these students by these campus administrations, many of them very much aligned with the Democratic Party. And so at the end of the day, we cannot build this anti-war movement if it is just left to students to carry out this personal sacrifice. Really what we need is, in the coming semesters or quarters, as the case may be, we need a massive expansion of the campus anti-war movement by building mass rallies of thousands of students. There are many, many students who will support if there's a call for a mass rally. We also need to invite the rank and file of the labor movement in a much bigger way than has happened, really put pressure on the labor leadership, on the campus union labor leadership, to come out and stand against the war and call for an end to US military funding for the Israeli state. And I think all of this also connects to, just the strategy that we need for the fight back on the war issue is the kind of strategy we need for winning Medicare for all anywhere. I mean, as Joe was saying, those of us who are organizing the Workers' Strike Back Conference, we really want to put forward this idea. And I personally really strongly believe in this, that we have to act locally, that is municipal, county, or state, not because it's going to be easier. I really don't buy into this really false idea that, oh, things are easier at local, so we should run local, and oh, Jill, why did you run for president? You know, that sort of thing we encounter all the time. I want to be very clear that regardless of whether it is municipal, county, or state, or at the Congress level, we can have zero illusions in the political establishment. Neither the Republicans nor the Democrats are going to be on our side. And we have to understand quite how entrenched the stranglehold is of the hospital industry, of the insurance industry, of the pharma industry. All these multimillionaires and billionaires, they are going to come down like a ton of bricks on any effort to build Medicare for all. We have to know that going in. And this is not something that I'm saying because I think so as a socialist. We've seen this happen again and again. In California, which is a very progressive state, meaning that the ordinary people in California lean progressive, you saw the Medicare for all effort being brought forward by lots of forces, including the California Nurses Union. So these are not small forces. These are pretty strong forces. Them bringing Medicare for all effort at the state level in 2017 and in 2022. What happened both times? There was a Democratic governor both times. First, it was Jerry Brown. Then it was Gavin Newsom. You had a state Senate and a state assembly overwhelmingly dominated by Democrats, roughly around 80%. And yet the Medicare for all efforts went down in flames. And I'm sorry, that's a bad metaphor given the massive and tragic LA fires. But my point is that the efforts completely were wiped out because there were illusions that the Democrats would do it. And I think that's the same clarity we have to have in Washington state as well. We, Workers' Strike Back and my organization, Revolutionary Workers, we strongly support whole Washington's efforts. But at the same time, we have to understand that the Democrats in Washington state are not going to do this because they are in the pockets of the insurance and pharma industry. And one example that I should mention where Medicare for all like effort was actually successful, obviously not in the United States, but Canada. How Canada won its public health care is crucial to understand. It didn't happen from any of the main parties of big business, not the Liberal Democrats or anyone. It was a small party called the CCF, which was a Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, which was led by socialists, Marxists like myself, and they were able to win Medicare for all like effort, socialized healthcare in Saskatchewan province, public healthcare in Saskatchewan province. And that became so popular that people started demanding around the country in Canada that they wanted universal healthcare. There was a 1949 Gallup poll that showed that 80% of Canadians at that time wanted universal healthcare. So the response to this successful program was so great that that's what put pressure on a conservative federal government in federal parliament to enact nationwide healthcare. So that shows that regardless of whether it's Democrats or Republicans in the White House, we are going to have to fight. And also conversely, regardless of who's in the White House, we can win, but we will need this kind of fighting strategy, which is independent of big business parties.
I think that is so incredibly important for people to hear because Kshama is right. It doesn't matter if it's Democrats or Republicans in charge. They're going to be against Medicare for all. They're bought by the pharma companies. People really got to understand that. But I agree with what you said there, Kshama. I think that is a good strategy there to have. I want to shout this out again for people who have just joined again. That is February 22nd, Seattle, Washington. Kshama Sawant and Jill Stein are organizing a conference. It's called the Organizing Conference, Fight the Rich and Their Two Parties in the Wars, Fight Trump, $25 hour minimum wage. Jill Stein, Chris Hedges, of course, and Kshama Sawant. Again, that's February 22nd at 10 a.m. PT. Kshama said this will also be live streamed as well. So I'll continue to give you guys updates about this particular conference. This is something that, like, honestly, considering what this organizing conference is about, this is something that Bernie Sanders and AOC and Ilhan Omar should all be on board for, because these are the types of things that they supported, right? So What you guys are starting to see is, again, like, you have to fight outside of the two parties. We tried fighting within the two-party system. And obviously, as you see, Dem leadership has a way of shutting things down. So I think this is a great idea. And yeah, Kshama, if you want to tell people about to register for the event.
Yes, people can go to Workers Strike Back website. So that's Workers Strike Back, all one word, workersstrikeback.org. And you'll find a link to register. So regardless of whether you can come in person or you can watch online, we want you to register so that we can send you all the information. So definitely make sure you join in. And as we were saying earlier, one of the main themes of this conversation will be the strategy for Fight Back, and specifically, what is the strategy needed to win Medicare for all through a ballot initiative at a local, city, county, or state level?
Well said. All right. Jill and Kshama, thank you so much. And Jill, so great to see you here, Jill. And even though people online right now are saying Jill's nowhere to be found, it's a coordinated PR effort happening right now on people.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of to die for in a way. It just reflects how running scared they still are, and the fact that they're still conjuring me up like their worst threat. Bring it up. It's a bit.
It's like simultaneously Jill accomplished nothing, and also she's responsible for everything bad. And I think they're having to drum up this again and again because it's becoming more and more exposed that that Biden refused to do the ceasefire. He refused to do all the things he could. And so they're doing that. The same stories have been said about me as well. I was simultaneously responsible for doing nothing at all and also ruining the entire city. And keep in mind, ruining it with $15 an hour Amazon tax and renters' rights. And I should mention before I leave that $15 an hour minimum wage that we won, Sabby, Jill, I don't know if you heard, but that was under attack by a Black council member in Seattle, Joy Hollingsworth, and her fellow Democrats. She brought forward a bill to completely attack $15 an hour last year, but Workers Strike Back fought back. We said that any council member who goes and votes on this, votes in favor of this, needs to be pulled out of the city council, needs to be driven out. And that's the kind of fighting message that forced them to backtrack on it. And starting January 1st, Seattle's minimum wage workers are getting $20.76, which is by far the highest minimum wage.
Woo. Wow. That's awesome. And the fact that they continue to attack you and attack me reflects that they don't have a strategy. I mean, that's right. They have abandoned working people, which is why the Democrats lost this election. And now they're incapable of even fighting back against Trump. When you see 100% of the Senate voting for the Trump's nominees for the Secretary of State, not even a single person standing up against, the endless war machine, which is what, their Secretary of State nominee will continue to support. They are not fighting. They still are incapable of fighting. They're all about collaborating and finding a way to get along. They're going down to Mar-a-Lago, to have their conversations. They are still not fighting for working people. And that is why they are attacking us, which again, it's a badge of honor, and it's a, it's energy and support that we need to seize this moment. It continues to be the perfect storm.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, Jill, that they're not only not fighting for working people, they're fighting on the other end. They're fighting to attack the things that we have already won. And I should mention, it would be remiss of me not mentioning this, Joy Hollingsworth, the council member I mentioned, who brought forward the legislation to attack the minimum wage law. She was actually endorsed by the Martin Luther King County Labor Council in glowing terms. She was endorsed by UFCW 3000, the biggest union in Washington state, which represents underpaid grocery workers. I mean, so in other words, to be clear, the leadership of the Labor Council, the leadership of UFCW 3000, all of whom get paid $250,000, $300,000 salaries, they get paid handsomely, while the members that they supposedly represent languish when they are not even able to pay rent. So many grocery workers are living in their cars. So the leadership of these labor institutions endorsed Joy Hollingsworth in glowing terms, and then she turns around and stabs union members and working people in the back. That's the true nature of the Democratic Party.
Absolutely. And we're seeing the same dynamic on the climate, where the Democrats basically passed their Inflation Reduction Act, which required 60 million acres offshore to be auctioned off, and 2 million acres of public lands onshore to be auctioned off every year before any renewable project could be supported. So and it was actually, in spite of the rhetoric, it's the Democrats who have always exceeded the Republicans in expanding fossil fuels. So it's a very bullshit framework right now, and people are horrified and really desperate for something positive to rally around. And as much as we felt it during the campaign, I think it's even more clear now, because people so get that there was no strategy, that, there's buyer's remorse if they dared to vote for either, to be fooled into voting for Trump or to have voted for Kamala Harris. There's just widespread remorse right now. And I think it's really important for us to rally around working people and the values that we share and the power that we have, and to reject this propaganda of powerlessness, and to just move forward like a bat out of hell. We got to rescue our future, because unions, traditional unions and political parties and nonprofits have betrayed us. They have completely betrayed us, and it's time for a reboot here with people-powered political power.
Awesome. Jill and Kshama, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Sabby.
See you there.
See you, Jill.
Bye, Kshama.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, that was Dr. Jill Stein and Kshama Sawant, again, talking about the conference that they have coming up in February. Again, especially if you're in that area, be sure to check that out. That is the organizing conference, Fight the Rich and Their Two Parties in the Wars, Fight Trump, $25 an hour minimum wage. Seattle, Washington, Saturday, February 22nd. That'll be Jill Stein, Chris Hedges, and Kshama Sawant. Don't miss that. Kshama also said they are going to stream that as well. So stay tuned for that. Again, guys, there are ways that you can fight outside of these two parties. And I think it's important that we do spend more time focusing on that. I know I talk about mutual aid, but especially for those of you that are activists and you're looking for something else to do, that's a great thing to participate in. So I think Eric can put the link there in the chat for you guys to register to sign up for that event as well. And we have more stories to discuss with you tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So tonight's theme is the data matters. The data matters. Yes, believe it or not, it's important. We're going to start off by giving a shout out to everyone who is a patron. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you, fam, holding down the fort around me. Hey, hey, hey. Let me see why I can't. Oh, there we go. All right. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters, doing the damn thing around here, guys. And of course, Sabbies. Don't forget about those. Healthy little bunch there. And we also have members. All of their names you can see, they are listed here. And they're also scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the clicker. Thank you so much. Oh, and I want to give a shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Byron DeRosan. Thank you, Byron. And welcome, 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 welcome back. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what else are we discussing tonight? Let's go ahead and share that beautiful thumbnail. Quite a bit to discuss. It's been an interesting week for news. So let's get into it. Tonight, I don't know what's going on with my chair. I don't know if I'm just too far to the left or to the right. Okay, there we go. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing Whitney Webb attacked. That's right. Investigative journalist Whitney Webb is being attacked for showing data. The data matters. We'll get into that. Of course, Jill Stein and Kshama Sawant were just here to talk about their new organizing conference. We're also going to discuss Donald Trump revokes the 1965 Act. We're going to get into the details about that. We're also discussing, I told you I was going to get into this. Gloria Steinem ruined civil rights. Yes, we are going to talk about how Gloria Steinem ruined the civil rights movement. You're going to hear a different angle about this time around when it comes to that particular wave of feminism. And last but not least, we're going to discuss the CNN layoffs. That's right. CNN is not looking too good these days. Not looking too good. First, we have a couple of chats. We're going to go to those. Shout out to Byron Biondiolio for becoming a Sabby member. Let's give Byron a big whoop whoop. All right. Navo says, hey, Sabby, love your show. Thank you and welcome, Navo. Dublin, why are they going after Whitney Webb? That's ridiculous. You're going to see why. You'll see. Thank you, New York Varsity. The 2 ways to be president is to be balloted in all 50 states and to be able to participate in the debates. Without that, a third party cannot win. Thank you. Krista's channel says, I'm not against third parties, but I honestly don't think a lot of these people want to vote for a third party, especially since people see third parties as the reason Trump won, even though that's not true. Right. And the data shows that's not true. Thank you, New York Varsity. Run Butch Ware now, not in 2027. The messaging here is noble, but his personality would get you 10 million votes before they know his stances. Thank you, Hotspot Casino. Just joined. Who attacked Whitney? We're going to get into it, guys. Everybody's like, what happened? Thank you, Nero. Keep it up, ladies. Y'all doing the damn work. Thank you so very much for keeping us informed and pushing for real change. Rawl says, I voted Jill. It's all my fault. And thank you, Roger. OMG, Kshama said the thing. CBIs now embrace WCs. I think you mean worker co-ops. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okie dokie. If you haven't had a chance to do so, folks, smash that like button. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And again, the theme tonight is the data matters. And you're going to see that in this next story as well. You know, cable news has not been doing too well. A lot of people point to Kamala Harris's loss in the presidential election in 2024. But let's be honest, guys, this was starting to happen before the presidential election. CNN started to see a decrease after Biden won in 2021. Believe it or not, Donald Trump being in office with all his craziness was actually good for ratings for them, right? And now they're doing layoffs, and not just any type of layoff. CNN has announced that they are laying off 200 employees. 200. Let's go ahead and get into this, folks. They are not having a good start to the year. CNN announces about 200 layoffs as it attempts to modernize business. Modernize business. They crack me up so much. Of course, they would show the picture there for the debate. It's interesting. Let's get into this here. It says CNN announced Thursday it is cutting about 6% of its total staff, or about 210 employees, as it refocuses the business around a global digital audience. You don't say. CNN CEO Mark Thompson announced the job loss in a memo to staff on Thursday, confirming CNBC's reporting Wednesday that cuts were coming. In the memo, Thompson noted CNN doesn't expect total headcount to fall much this year because the company plans to invest $70 million in new digital plans. What does that mean, folks? Basically, here's what it's coming down to. Their ratings started to drop. Then eventually their ratings just started to plummet. It's not just them. MSNBC is having like the ratings issues as well. And they're starting to see that, again, younger viewers typically are not watching corporate media. Younger viewers are more likely to watch YouTube, right? So they're more likely to run across someone who's in independent media. Maybe they might run across like a Breaking Points video, right? Because they have over 1 million subscribers. They might run across them. They might run across David Pakman. They might run across like Jimmy Dore. They may run across those videos and may become more interested because it's different. And maybe there's something that those people are telling you that corporate media is leaving out. So this is very important. I see this as CNN's way, not just to improve their ratings, but also to try to engage with younger viewers. Now, we all know that the Democratic Party also lost the youth vote. So I feel like this could be their way as also trying to help the Democratic Party as well, since CNN is more left leaning. It goes on to say here, I know that whatever the total number of job losses, the impact on the individuals involved can be immense. This is coming from Thompson. The process of change is essential if we're to thrive in the future. But I both acknowledge and regret its very real human consequences. The layoffs come as CNN is rearranging its linear TV lineup and building out digital subscription products. What did I tell you guys last year? More media companies are choosing to move towards digital, right? Like they want to move in that direction because, again, a lot of younger viewers, they're more likely to watch a stream, like a live stream, or even videos that are on YouTube or Twitch or something like that. So now they're trying to move towards that and the subscription. So basically, the way I believe this is going to work is that you would sign up for a subscription and you would get access to the digital CNN products. Now, CNN tried a similar thing before with CNN Plus. It didn't work out too well for them. So I don't think CNN realizes that. I think a lot of younger adults, let's say like Gen Z, probably aren't going to want to pay for a subscription to CNN. I think that if they're watching YouTube or if they're watching Twitch, they're probably going to watch something that's a little bit different. You're probably not going to be their go-to. But what do I know? It goes on to say, I just want to laugh. I'm sorry. The cuts will help CNN lower production costs and consolidate teams, according to people familiar with the matter, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss non-public thinking. Certain shows that are produced in New York or Washington may move to Atlanta, where production can be done more cheaply. That's going to lead to gentrification. Just FYI for all my peeps that live in Atlanta, and the ATL is already experiencing gentrification, but that's going to lead to more gentrification. I'm just going to go ahead and give you the heads up about that, fam. It goes on to say, for the most parts, the job cuts won't affect CNN's most recognizable names who are under contract. CNN has about 3,500 employees worldwide. A CNN spokesperson declined to comment beyond Thompson's statement. So here are the new plans. They've announced several initiatives in the memo. The company is planning a new way for digital subscribers to stream CNN outside of CNN Max, which exists within Warner Brothers, Discovery's broader Max streaming service. CNN plans to announce content details in the coming months. So why would you want to stream CNN? Like, this is the, like, also, you can see CNN videos on YouTube as well. Why would you want to pay for a subscription to stream CNN? It's just, I don't know. And it's just weird. Just weird. It goes on to say here, CNN planned to launch its own streaming service, CNN Plus. Remember this, guys? In 2022, but the service was shut down almost immediately by Chris Licht, who had been appointed to take over as CEO. CNN plans to hire at least 100 new jobs in the coming months to build out a broader digital presence, investing in product and tech, as well as new high quality journalism and storytelling. That's what I mean. High quality journalism and storytelling. Tim, though, said subscription to hell. Oh my God. This is this is so interesting. Okay. CNN is also revamping its linear TV schedule in the U.S. and internationally. The news network is developing new U.S. Morning shows, adding an hour to The Situation Room, hosted by Wolf Blitzer and Pamela Brown. It's moving CNN's The Arena with Casey Hunt to 4 p.m. and Jake Tapper's The Lead to 5 p.m. So big changes happening with CNN. It's a little wild. But that also is happening after CNN was just found liable for this defamation suit. So they have a couple of things going on here. They have to deal with this defamation suit from the Navy veteran. And on top of that, they have layoffs that they're dealing with. And they're trying to transform into a whole digital streaming service. What a doozy. Remember this? This just happened recently.
That is some news in the media world. A Florida jury finding CNN liable for defamation for a 2021 report about Navy veteran Zachary Young and his work as a private security contractor in Afghanistan. The screenshot you see here is from a report which aired in November 2021 on The Lead with Jake Tapper about Young and other contractors who were helping people flee the country. Look at the text on the screen. It refers to, quote, black markets, which Young's lawyer argued falsely implied he engaged in illegal activity. Young sued CNN for this report, accusing the network of ruining his reputation and his business. The jury ordering CNN to pay him $5 million for defamation as they prepared to deliberate on how much CNN would additionally pay in punitive damages. CNN settled that portion of the lawsuit for an undisclosed sum. In a statement, a spokesperson for CNN writing, quote, "We remain proud of our journalists and are 100% committed to strong, fearless, and fair-minded reporting, though we will, of course, take what useful lessons we can from this case." For more on this, I want to bring in David Folkenflik. He's a media correspondent for NPR News and a friend to Top Story. David, walk us through, for our viewers at home that maybe aren't as versed on defamation or how these kind of reports are put together, walk our viewers through what the jury found and what the ruling essentially says.
Sure. So defamation is a case where you're saying something that is untrue or wrong, and you're also saying something that is going to be harmful to how the public will perceive that person. Now, Zachary Young is a former he's a U.S. Navy veteran. He was a private security contractor, and this affected his business, his lawyers argued. He's not a public official. He's not a celebrity. So the bar for him to exceed is not as high as it would be, at least on the first half of defamation and the first $5 million verdict that you just informed readers about. So they have to say, basically, does it seem reasonable to think that a reader or viewer would come away with this wrong inference that he had engaged in illegal activity? The black market idea was really stressed throughout the trial by his attorney, a guy named Devin Friedman. And also, secondly, does the implication of the larger story, does a reasonable reader or viewer of the versions, the stories that CNN put out there, think that this is a bad guy and has acted in ways that are wrong? And his lawyers, successfully made that case.
I want to show you some of the text messages and to our viewers as well.
So you guys can see here, I'm not sure if everyone was familiar with this particular situation, but this Navy veteran, he sued CNN for defamation and he won. Now, this was just recently, so they got to deal with that. And now they're laying off employees. So it doesn't look good for them at all. I want you to see some of these text messages as well.
That were shown in court, right? These were text messages between CNN staff about Zachary Young that say, quote, "We're going to nail this Zachary Young MFer." You know what that refers to? Quote, "What a punchable face," among others. We should mention the CNN producers and reporters did not deny these text messages, but denied the messages implied that the story was a, quote, hit piece. How do you
I would imagine that those employees were probably the first to go. They were probably the first to go with the layoffs there. But things are not looking good for CNN, ladies and gentlemen. It's obvious that they're trying to find a way to rebrand once again. They've already tried to do this just about a year and a half ago. And here they are again. But of course, like I said, the data matters. It's showing you once again that their numbers continue to decline and they're trying to find a way, I guess, to boost those numbers again. It's interesting, though. I think it's funny. They think that people want to pay for a subscription to watch CNN. Just trying to hold in the laugh that came out. Oh boy. All right, guys. What a doozy, man. Sometimes I can't talk about this with a straight look on my face because it's just funny. This is really comical. Let's go to some of the comments here. Nobody says the public don't trust CNN. How are they going to rebuild their reputation as credible news? There's no incentive to subscribe. Yeah, it's weird. Like, why would you? I mean, are you getting like some exclusive interviews, like watching that, digital service or something like that you're not going to see anywhere else? I mean, I don't get it. Thank you, Andrew. Good luck with CNN plus 2.0. And Tim says, I'll pay to watch paint dry first. Well, CNN, it is not sounding good. Wow, guys. Wow, wow, wow. Okie dokie. We're doing pretty well on time, fam. Pretty well on time. I actually want to switch these two around here. No, we can do it that way. Okay. Smash that like button and we're moving on. Again, the data matters. Donald Trump has decided to revoke the 1965 Equal Opportunity Act for federal contractors. Now, I have to say federal contractors because I noticed online, I think people were getting confused. There's the Equal Opportunity Act, and then there's the Equal Opportunity Act for federal contractors. This is the one that was signed by LBJ, if I'm not mistaken. So we're going to go directly to the White House website to show you what was done. And then we're going to pivot over to a panel discussion so you can see how people are discussing this. Now, number one, this is Donald Trump speaking to his base. I was surprised to see that so many people were surprised online that this was done. When Donald Trump was running, what did he say that he was going to do? We're going to get rid of the DEI. We're going to get rid of the woke stuff, all that jazz. And this is exactly what he's doing. So far, everything that he has promised to his base, with the exception of Ukraine, but so far, most of these things have been signed via executive order by Donald Trump. Now, I want to show you just some of the things that he did here and who it might impact. So this is straight from the White House website. Ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. Remember, he was talking about this? So here we go, folks. So he goes on to say here, we're going to jump into the DEI part. Illegal DEI and DEIA policies not only violate the text and the spirit of our longstanding federal civil rights laws, they also undermine our national unity as they deny, discredit, and undermine the traditional American values of hard work, excellence, and individual achievement in favor of an unlawful, corrosive, and precarious identity-based spoils system. Hardworking Americans who deserve a shot at the American dream should not be stigmatized, demeaned, or shut out of opportunities because of their race or sex. So it's interesting, that part right there, not shut out of opportunities because of their race or sex, because the reason why we had these equal opportunity acts is because those things were happening. People were being discriminated against because of their race, because of their sex. Don't forget, this also applies to people who are disabled as well. And contrary to what people may believe, not everyone that's on disability is not allowed to work. Some people have a certain type of disability where they still can work, right? So they can still get employment as well. So I didn't understand why many people were surprised because he said he was going to do this. So let's go into this a little bit deeper. It goes on to say these illegal DEI and DEIA policies also threaten the safety of American men, women, and children across the nation by diminishing the importance of individual merit, aptitude, hard work, and determination when selecting people for jobs and services in key sectors of American society, including all levels of government and the medical, aviation, and law enforcement communities. Yet in case after tragic case, the American people have witnessed firsthand the disastrous consequences of illegal, precarious discrimination that has prioritized how people were born instead of what they're capable of doing. So let me pause there for just a second. The reason why DEI was implemented in the workplace, because it was a response to the murder of George Floyd. That was the response to that. I still remember when we had the seminar at Boston University and they announced that they were going to start doing these DEI policies, right? And it's interesting that that was the response to George Floyd because that wasn't the demand. When those of us that were out there protesting for George Floyd, we weren't demanding this. We were demanding defund the police. We were demanding, hold the police departments accountable. We were demanding those types of things, but this was how they chose to respond. Very interesting. That being said, I've seen this not go well and I've seen it go okay, like with DEI, right? The reality is, which Donald Trump knows this. The reality is we don't live in a colorblind society in this country. Donald Trump is moving forward with merit-based, policy as if we live in a colorblind society, and the reality is that we don't. If we lived in a colorblind society, we wouldn't have needed an Equal Opportunity Act to begin with in the first place. Even though this one in particular is affecting federal contractors, still, some people said, oh, don't worry about it. It's not going to affect you because it only matters to federal contractors. Well, I have news for you. A lot of businesses have federal contracts. A lot of them do, right? So I've seen it work okay, and I've seen it not work okay. But from my experience with the DEI policies, at the university level, it benefited white women the most. This is something a lot of people don't talk about. When it came to those hiring practices, once they started, they told faculty members and they told hiring managers, you have to be inclusive and all this jazz, which they should want to do that anyway. But what ultimately happened is that their idea of being inclusive meant to hire more white women, especially for the managerial roles. It wasn't people like me. I was already there before DEI policies. I had already been there a couple of years. But that was the interesting part. So when you see this type of action from Donald Trump, a lot of people keep saying, oh, Black people this, Black people that. This is going to affect you too, white women. Don't forget, I've said this over and over again, that when it comes to workplace employment, white women benefit the most from affirmative action. There's data that backs that up. Again, the data matters. It goes on to say here, so we're going to dive down to this part. These are the items that are revoked. Terminating illegal discrimination in the federal government. The following executive actions are hereby revoked. Okay. Executive order 12, we don't have to read these numbers. Executive order, the first one here. Federal actions to address environmental justice in minority populations and low-income populations. The following executive actions are hereby revoked. So Jill Stein had Cancer Alley a part of her political platform. Does everybody see what's happening here? So if you are revoking that, federal actions to address environmental justice in minority populations and low income populations, that affects Flint, Michigan. That affects Denmark, South Carolina. So for Black people that voted for Donald Trump, how do you feel about that? Let's continue to go on here. I'll get to Miranda's thing in just a second. Executive order, here's the next one. Establishing a coordinated government-wide initiative to promote diversity and inclusion in the federal workforce. So again, that is revoked. Here's another one. Further amendments to Executive Order Equal Opportunity in the federal government and Executive Order Equal Opportunity and the Presidential Memorandum promoting diversity and inclusion in the national security workforce. So again, a lot of this applies to federal contracts. And here's the other part here about the contracts. The federal contracting process shall be streamlined to enhance speed and efficiency, reduce costs, and require federal contractors and subcontractors to comply with our civil rights laws. Accordingly, Executive Order Equal Employment Opportunity is hereby revoked. For 90 days from the date of this order, federal contractors may continue to comply with regulatory scheme in effect on January 20th, 2025. So, as I've said before, a lot of businesses have federal contracts. Now, again, he's revoking the equal employment opportunity that applies to federal contracts. When this was first announced online, and I can't remember the name of the account, I think it's called Pop Crave, was announcing this online. I think they quoted this wrong, and they gave people the impression that this was the equal opportunity employment law of the land that was being revoked. That's not the same thing. That's not being revoked. So the way it works is that these companies still have to abide by non-discrimination laws, But when it comes to federal contractors, I mean, there's ways you can discriminate against people without being obvious about it. You know what I mean? It's not like they're saying, I'm not going to hire you because you're black. You can still not hire somebody and not be obvious about it and come up with other reasons. So what you are seeing happening, and I'll go to the next part in just a second, is that Donald Trump is responding to his base. This is what his base wanted, and this is what he's doing. And he didn't waste any time. Notice that he's only been in office, since Monday. And look at how quickly he's moving through, just signing all these executive orders. Now, we still ain't get to Ukraine, but just signing one after one after one after one, right? So this part here, again, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs within the Department of Labor shall immediately cease promoting diversity, holding federal contractors and subcontractors responsible for taking affirmative action, and allowing or encouraging federal contractors and subcontractors to engage in workforce balancing based on race, color, sex, sexual preference, religion, or national origin. That means obviously no quotas, right? Like you can't be like, there's 10 of us that work in this office, so at least 2 or 3 have to be people of color. Like you can't do that. So what he's trying to do is this push to hire people based on their merit, based on their qualifications and their skills, and not because of their race or their sex or their religion, etc. But from my experience, a lot of times the merit and the qualifications were looked at first. And then what would happen is, like, if there's 4 white guys and like there's one black guy and they all applied for the same job, but they all have like the same experience, that type of thing, then that's where the edge would go to the black guy, right? But like in other cases, like I said, from at the university level, a lot of times when they started the DEI policies at the university, those jobs went to white women. And it wasn't that black people weren't applying or interviewing for those jobs. I had to interview people sometimes as well. But their idea of the whole DEI thing and inclusion was more women, more white women. That's how that ended up working. And I think a lot of people just may not realize that, especially like, say, if you didn't work for a company or you worked from home. I think a lot of people just didn't realize this is what was happening. Just Z says, black women have to be overqualified. Yeah. And I think this is what, and Just Z is right. I think this is what people don't understand. Like in my experience, I couldn't just meet the minimum requirements. I had to be above and beyond the minimum requirements. And so, and typically with me, by the time you bring me in for an interview, they didn't know what color I was. There's white people named Sabrina, black people named Sabrina, you know. Sabrina can be any race. So they didn't know what color I was until I arrived at the interview. And even then, they could still reject me if they wanted to. But this whole thing has just been caused, oh my God, it's so frustrating. Promoting diversity, holding federal contractors and subcontractors responsible for taking affirmative action, and allowing or encouraging federal contractors and subcontractors to engage in workforce balancing. Okay, we did the workforce balancing part. Okay, so you guys see what's happening there. Now, they discussed this on this panel here. Shout out to Simon Ataba for gathering this clip. They're going to discuss this on this panel. And there's something I want you to pay attention to, because we all don't have the same struggles, right? On this show, we talk about all different issues, but it's really, really important for me to make it very clear how these policies affect me. Okay, like how they affect me, how they affect my community, and some of the things that I think corporate media omits from their coverage. I want you to pay attention to what the Hispanic guy says in this video. Because see, when you say people of color, people have to understand we don't have the same struggle. Listen to what he says when they discuss this reversal here by Donald Trump.
I think President Trump has actually stated he's focused and drilled in the merit it's all about merit. He's made it very clear. If you work hard and you're going to do a great job, I'm not going to look at the color of your skin, or you're going to get the job. And it's like I've watched him talk, and I've watched him in the campaign talk about how he feels that we're going to hire the best of the best, and it's going to be driven by merit and merit only. I happen to be Hispanic, and I became the Lieutenant Governor of California, and I want to believe that happened because of my hard work, my dedication, being disciplined, and
your good looks.
Pause. See, this is something, again, we have to push back on, and they don't push back on. They're not going to tell you on that panel what I'm about to tell you, what's missing from that conversation. He's a Hispanic male, and he says, I worked hard, and I want to believe that that's how I got to where I was, right? Okay. He is white adjacent. This is the problem with the people of color framing, right? If you look at the two of them, this gentleman here on the right, and then you have Abby Phillips here on the left, they're not going to deal with the same issues. And don't get me wrong, there's discrimination, all different levels, but they're not going to deal with the same issues. People have to understand that Mr. Dude here, who was the lieutenant governor, they have to understand that on an application, he can also say that he's white. So it bothers me when other people of color say that they got to where they were because they worked hard. Because what he didn't have to deal with, that my family did have to deal with, was systemic issues in this country that did not apply to him. Because he didn't have to deal with Jim Crow laws. He didn't have to deal with the redlining. He didn't have to deal with the things that Black Americans in this country had to deal with, and a lot of the systemic issues that we still deal with. So when you come into the country and you get to bypass all those systemic institutions, it's going to be a little bit easier for you. This is why we got to be careful about the people of color thing, right? And this is not to say, again, I've said it before, this is not to say that they don't deal with discrimination, because they do. But oftentimes, in my experience, a lot of times people of color that are not Black have no problem, identifying as not focusing on being a person of color until someone that's white reminds them that they're not white. That's been my experience. So his thing is, because I did it, you can do it too, folks.
I don't know about the good looks, but I can tell you this, it's how I feel. So I think the opportunities for everybody. Now, when Alfonso talks about some people are going to get hurt, I don't see it that way. I just respectfully disagree with you. I think that if they are hard workers and they're disciplined and they're very, very brilliantly smart, they're going to get the job. They're going to stay in that job.
Conversation.
So that's a big no. Because the thing is, nowadays, it's not based on how hard you work. It's based on who you know. This is something I had to learn along the way, especially when I first started a full-time job with benefits after undergrad. I had to learn, and thankfully I had a boss who explained this to me, because a lot of people don't, that no one is going to give you a promotion just because you do a good job. No one is going to give you a promotion just because you work hard. Oh, honey, those days are gone. When my parents were going through, all this and stuff like that, like they would just get promoted after they had been at the company for a certain number of years. Like they would just get promoted. But with my generation, that was like not a thing. And so I had to learn that the hard way. It was really all about who you knew, who you kissed up to, so you really got to go in there and whose ass I got to kiss. Who do I have to rub elbows with? Because those were the people that got promoted, not the people who necessarily worked hard. Oftentimes, the people who got promoted were the people who did just enough to get by, but they kissed the right ass. So I don't like this whole motto of you just got to work hard.
Actually highlights what I think is so dangerous, right? What you're suggesting is that merit and minority applicants are mutually exclusive. That's what you're suggesting. You're saying that if I'm a minority candidate, that means I am actually unqualified, right?
No, I don't think he is at all. I don't think he is at all. I'm not going to listen to you say that.
Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the facts. Why is it the majority of people who run Fortune 500 companies are white men?
There you go. I mean, it just.
Why is that?
Why is it?
I mean,
Why do we only have 2 black women that are running Fortune 500 companies? Are you telling me?
You got to work harder.
No.
Why is Donald Trump
not the
only
right
appoint
answer.
one black person to his cabinet?
You can't tell me that we have to work harder.
Pause. So it's not because those people didn't necessarily work harder. That's a myth. It's because they didn't have the resources and the networking to get to that level. People think that you think everyone that's a CEO worked hard. A lot of these people that are CEOs, they already came from wealth. So that helps. You're already in those social circles, right? Or the networks that they establish. Now, here's the thing about networking. Oftentimes people in the workplace tend to stick to their own. Oftentimes. That's what I've seen. So if you're not a part of that group, then you may not be a part of that network. So when their boss comes to them and say, I'm looking for someone to fill this position, do you have anybody in mind? They got to post the job externally anyway. But a lot of times these people are already chosen before the interviews even start. Let me tell you, hello. You got anybody in mind? So that person's going to think of a friend that they have in their network who most likely, most of the time, may look just like them. And this is where the diversity part does not take play. So you see what happens here? People often, they bring in people that are a part of their network. I've seen this happen over and over again. You know how many times I had to sit there and interview people knowing they had already chosen someone for the job? People pick their friends. They pick people who are already in their circles. And a lot of you guys that are coming into these interviews and you're an external applicant, meaning you don't already work at the company, a lot of times you won't know it, but they already decided who they wanted. They got to bring you in anyway because they have to post the job externally. And we had a rule that you had to interview at least one external applicant. It's a waste of a lot of people's time, but a lot of times these people are already chosen. Now, did so-and-so's friend necessarily work hard? Or did she get the interview and the job because she already knew somebody who was there? That's why his little mantra here doesn't work.
That black, brown people, women are not working hard enough, and that's why they're not in.
Absolutely not. I'm saying
You
that
just said they work harder.
I'm an American.
Why is it
I'm
that
proud of
we
my
only have
heritage.
2 black women that are running Fortune 500 companies? Answer that question for me.
Well, I mean, I don't know how the hiring process was in that company. I can tell you that, but all I'm telling you is that there's a lot of black women who serve in the legislature. I mean, we had a black woman vice president. I mean, she earned it. She worked hard.
She knew who was there. So here comes the excuse. The example that he gives with Kamala Harris actually doesn't work. He says we had a black woman vice president. She worked hard. Kamala, she rubbed the right elbows. Don't forget, it was the Clintons that encouraged her to run for Senate. She was already selected. Joe Biden didn't even want Kamala Harris as his vice president. He wanted Amy Klobuchar, the woman that likes to throw forks at people and shit. He wanted her. But the Dem leadership circle said, no, you need to pick her, so more black people can come out and you can beat Trump for real. So people need to be honest here. It's not like she didn't get there because she was a hard worker. There's a lot of people that are hard workers. There's a lot of attorneys in the United States that work hard, or attorney generals that work hard. And they're not, chosen to go for the Senate. She was selected. The Clintons selected her. They were like, yes, she's next. She'll be one. Just like Tulsi Gabbard when she was still a Dem. They already handpicked people. So she already knew the right people. So you can't leave that out. Nobody on this table is going to say that, though.
So it wasn't given it to her.
You sat at this table many times when basically the Republican Party, Donald Trump, his vice president, called her a DEI hire.
Yes.
Said that she
I
was
didn't
not.
call her a DEI hire.
I'm not talking about you. I said the people running for office against her called her a DEI hire. To your point, everything is being blamed on DEI. California fires, DEI. Trump's shooting, the rally at the Trump shooting, DEI, even though the head of his detail is a white man. Right-wing commentators talking about plane safety, saying planes are going to crash because of DEI.
But to that point, you had a video of a firefighter in Los Angeles, right, talking about the diversity in recruitment and saying that a person who gets themselves trapped in a fire is their own fault. Okay. You have to see how ridiculous the American public views that.
That happened. But Joe, did they cause the wildfire?
Did they cause the wildfire?
Did that individual or even that ideology prevent the Los Angeles Fire Department from putting out a wildfire, 5 wildfires?
But it's saying that particular firefighter is saying that she, I don't want to misgender her and get more trouble, but she is unable to lift someone out of a fire, and it's the person's fault.
Does that have anything to do with the wildfires and the ability to stop
I think a person's
Well, the prisoners that are doing free labor in California to put out some of these fires, can all of them lift someone out of a fire as well? Probably not. So my fear with the whole DEI thing, even though I've had some criticism of it before too, because I told you in my experience, it mainly benefited white women for hires. But my biggest fear is that now it's like anytime you have a job that someone doesn't think that you should have because they don't think that you were smart enough to get it, you're automatically going to be considered a DEI hire. That's the part that bothers me. And it's just what people have to understand. And for white people listening, what you have to understand is that for those of us that are Black, we have to prove to people that we deserve to be where we are. Whereas you automatically just get that respect because people automatically assume that you're knowledgeable, you're intelligent enough to get it. So we always have to prove that we're supposed to be there. And now the biggest fear that I have is that people are just going to think, oh my God, it's a doctor. You go to see the doctor. And, oh, it's a new doctor here. Oh my God, the doctor's Black, DEI hire. Even though you have to get through med school. That's my biggest fear. That's why I heavily push back on the statement that Charlie Kirk made when he said, if I see a Black pilot, I'm going to be like, oh my God, I'm really scared. That's dangerous. That message that he put out there was dangerous. So that's the fear that I have.
Ability to carry someone out of a fire is a pretty
I'm talking about the wildfires and the ability to stop them. What
I don't think DEI was responsible for setting a fire. That's not what they were saying.
Clearly was not.
But
and
that's what
clearly
people
was
say.
Not responsible for being able to put out the fire as well.
Also, I hear you, and I'm glad you don't think discrimination should happen. But our sitting president actually does, because he discriminated against Black people. He did not want them to be able to rent from him, and he is yet to repent for it and say it is wrong. It is something that is woven into our country, and I understand that folks feel like DEI has gone too far, but disparities exist for a reason, and DEI was a tactic to ensure that people had equal opportunity. Now, I think the numbers will speak for themselves. I think, and I also, again, this goes back to the immigration thing. This whole like snitch on people that Donald Trump, they better be careful, because Donald Trump sits next to people that might get snitched on themselves.
Snitches get stitches. Be careful.
I didn't want to say it. I was waiting for you. You're from New York.
Let's talk about equal opportunity, right? Because this is what this is all about. It's about opening up the doors and removing the barriers that have existed for decades. Right? There is a reason why Black people in this country only have 15% of the wealth as white people. So what are you telling us? Are you telling us that we are unqualified, unsmart, that we're not actually operating based on merit? Why is it that we have a culture?
Affirmative action.
But you know what he doesn't do when he mentions the racial wealth gap? He doesn't bring up reparations. He's not going to go all the way there. He's not going to go in for the touchdown. He's just going to get to the 20-yard line and stop there. And he's just going to say, let's just settle for the field goal.
And for white men, for literally hundreds of years in this country, for hundreds of years, there was affirmative action for white men. And to answer your question, because my friend Abel would not, it is not because they're not working hard enough. It's because for centuries, they were locked out of education. For centuries, they were locked out of economic mobility. They couldn't even build wealth. They were set free in this country after being enslaved for hundreds of years with nothing.
And then a lot of times arrested too. That's the other thing, arrested after set free, which a lot of times people don't get into. So Nina Turner kind of summed this up as well, which I think people need to hear this. She said the Democratic Party ran a historically unpopular president that had to drop out 4 months before the election with the threat of Trump looming. We should all be holding the party accountable. They did that, not the progressive left. And, you know, this is how Trump was able to win again. This is how, not embracing these policies that were very popular to help working class people, working people. And so this is how we ended up with Donald Trump again. They learned nothing from Hillary 2016. I told you guys before the election happened, I went through my poll predictions on this show with the swing states. And what did I tell you? I told you I predicted Donald Trump was going to win every swing state. A number of people came after me and said I was a Trump supporter. They told me I was a liar. Like, people were so, you know, but I was right because I just couldn't see it. After talking to people on the ground, I just couldn't see it, how she was going to be able to win. And so my message to people is this. The Democratic Party should be embarrassed that Donald Trump won again. That's how we got here. That's how we get to him passing these executive orders like this one, like revoking, you know, equal opportunity for the federal contract jobs. Like, that's how we get here. But instead of looking at the party and what they can do better, they have, you know, their minions out there pointing fingers at the voters. And I've said before, that is a bad idea. Pointing at people and saying, how dare you, you didn't vote for me, and calling them names doesn't make people want to come out and support you. It actually makes them check the fuck out. Everybody knows what's going on. Why do you guys think Ro Khanna, he reached out to my comrade Nick over at RBN and said, can I come on and talk to your audience? Because they know. And not only do they know now, they know that they have and even with everything that Donald Trump is passing, they know they still have a slim chance to win next time. That's the crazy part. So to what Jill and Kshama Sawant said in the interview, they're correct. We got to mobilize and organize now. And I don't want to hear people saying, let's wait to the year of the next election and let's get no, we need to be organizing now. Oh boy. Let's go to some of the comments here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Zach, the Celtics guy. Hey, my Celtics bud. In the middle of playing GTA Online while listening to Sabby and hearing corporate crap news going downhill makes me so tickled pink. Thank you, Tim. Hey, Sabs, did you watch Jink on PBD Pod yet? Emailed. I did see that. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I think people need to can we all just take a break from talking about Jink Uger for a while? Thank you. I need a break from hearing the voice. Like, this is that. Thank you, Tim. CNN does everything except telling the truth. Oh, yes, guys, don't forget to answer that poll. There's a poll pinned to the live chat. Miranda says, won't this be challenged in court? Then again, the Supreme Court is a kangaroo court. I would think it would be challenged in court, but who knows? Thank you, DeAndre. Demos who benefited from affirmative action, DEI, white women to Hispanic women. That's right. The data matters. Thank you, Nick. Voted for Jill Stein in Ohio, learned after the fact that my vote was invalidated. I'm sure it happened to many others here. Yeah, Ohio did a sneaky thing. They decided to tell people after the fact. They were like, oh, your votes aren't going to count there. It's bullshit. Thank you, China. Do you think they should get rid of race on job applications overall, since they keep saying they want a colorblind society? Oh, China, that is a good question. Maybe that's something they should test out. That's a good point. Why is your race needed for the application? I think you're onto something, China. Thank you, Eskimo. Did you see Trump declassify JFK and MLK assassinations? Yes, I agree with that. I just hope it's not very redacted, right? I hope it's not just a bunch of black lines across the pages, but I do agree with that. JB says, yep. And most people have proximity to people of the same race. So if you don't know someone, then it's harder to get the job. Bingo. Patrick, I wish Sabby was on these panels. These people are dumb and too partisan. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Marriage, politics, and sports. The fear of being labeled a DEI hire is a pre-Trump executive order. Now, when people see a black person post executive order, wouldn't that label begin to go away? I don't know. That's a good point. I'll think about that. Thank you, Satra. Paul Mooney stated, we were qualified when we warmed their beds, breastfed their offspring, picked cotton, indigo, rice, etc., and took our inventions. Ooh, that's a good one from Paul Mooney. And thank you, Focus. What were they talking about? Most CEOs aren't white. They are Ashkenazi, but they're too scared to say that. Oh, Focus, what you do? What did you do, Focus? And thank you, Eskimo. From 1860 to 1965, over 120 black towns were burned down or flooded. Atlanta, 1906, Rosewood, 1923, Elaine, 1919, Chicago, 1919, Arkansas, 1919, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1922, and Wilmington, North Carolina, 1898, Springfield, 1908, Carfax, Louisiana. Yeah, see, guys, this is what I was trying to tell you before. There were multiple Black Wall Streets. It wasn't just Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's right. Okay. We're moving on to something spicy. All right. Okay. Smash the like button, guys. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Again, the data matters. So we're moving on to the next story. Whitney Webb is an investigative journalist, very smart. I sometimes say she's like a walking encyclopedia. She's been on the show. One thing about Whitney Webb is that she knows her data, right? Like facts just kind of spew like out of her head. And now she's being challenged, like out of nowhere. All of a sudden, all these people are attacking Whitney Webb. It was really weird. I'm like, where is this coming from? And why now? People are accusing her of being black-pilled because she is not willing to lie about their favorite politician. Now, it all started with this from Brett Weinstein. Brett said, America has left the WHO, the WHO. Well done, President Trump. Thank you. So a lot of people that supported Trump, and even some libertarians, former RFK supporters, were very happy about this one. Very happy that he decided, okay, we're going to leave the WHO, right? So Whitney decided to just forewarn everybody for a second. And this is when people start to lose their shit. To be fair, Trump also left the WHO in mid-2020 and then just redirected what was once WHO funding to the Gates-funded Gavi Jab Alliance. We got to be careful on YouTube. While leaving the WHO is positive, it is not the slam dunk some people are advertising, especially considering Gates' recent comments on Trump's enthusiasm for his jab innovation proposals. So Whitney is pointing out here that, number one, this is not the first time that Trump has done this. She's there to remind people he did it also in 2020. And I think we all know, what happened after that. And apparently people did not like her saying this. Troy said Whitney is a boss. She is. She is, man. Oh my God. She said, I got called a lot of names for pointing things like this out. But remembering what happened the last time is important and often instructive about the present, especially when few people in media are inclined to point these kinds of things out. So Whitney is giving everybody a heads up. Okay. She's trying to warn you. Don't get too excited about that. Let's remember what happened before and that this could happen again. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. However, if you're a stan, you might get offended. And it appears that is what happened. So here come the attacks, folks. Walter Kern, of all people, jumped in. And they must have sent out like some type of maybe they're all in a DM group together. And they must have sent out a PR message that said, go after Whitney. I don't know, because it was just one after another. I couldn't keep up with all of them. So listen to this. Walter Kern says Whitney Webb is a black-pilled artist with a bot army and a live troll army and many odd munchkins behind her, plus lots of other curious resources. And I'm just like, this dude just called people munchkins? Like what? Like what? This is too much. This is too much. So he goes on to say, follow how she does her thing for a little while. Her techniques are simple. No one is as radical and brave as Whitney. No one sees the deep layers like Whitney. Optimists and enthusiasts and people who get a little upbeat about any non-Whitney approved leader or figure or policy are dupes. They might even be secret agents or super quadruple, ultra mega, crypto, Zion, Theo, Musk, left, right, everything, octopus. That only Whitney is truly opposing on this godforsaken, tokenized, commodified poison for profit, etc. earth of ours. Okay. So notice the Theo Musk, like the Peter Thiel thing, which Whitney has a lot of information about that. Again, she has the data to back it up. So dude is taking great offense. Lana says, Walter, you know better. It's pretty bad. So he goes on to say, and where am I here? Follow the responses to this post if you want to see what I'm talking about. And don't ever let her bum you out or turn you against one another or cause you to suddenly lose all faith in people you used to like or trust before Whitney, the only true seeress, came along. She who sees through all the ops. I know the game when I see it. I play it now and then myself. We all do, but not like Whitney. So this is coming from Walter Kern, who is an author. I believe one of his books was made into a movie. I think it's called Up in the Air or something like that. George Clooney's in it or something. But anyway, you guys get what's happening here, right? So he's going after her. And Jeremy Lafredo from the Gray Zone, he says, Walter, what Whitney's saying is entirely true, though. The last time Trump left the WHO, he gave all the money to Gates, whose priorities are the exact same as the WHO and is the biggest funder of the WHO. So good job there, Jeremy. And then Walter Kim goes, that doesn't matter. So now facts don't matter. So she's telling the truth, but it doesn't matter. I can't make this stuff up, you guys. People just and then of course Nick, my comrade Nick here from RBN says, so you are essentially mad because she's not buying into your cult and you can't debunk her. And it wasn't just him. Alexandros Marinos, comes in. I guess they go tag team each other. Your favorite black pill. See, now everybody's black pill. See how they got the same talking points? Your favorite black pill dealer, Whitney Webb, here with more trash data and vague insinuations. In this episode, she claims Trump redirected WHO funding to Gavi. In reality, she is asserting that unrelated funding from U.S. aid to Gavi was made because of the withdrawal from the WHO in 2020. Okay. It goes on to say the U.S. aid funding to Gavi was part of a long-term funding stream that U.S. aid had been providing to Gavi since 2001. So, and he shows the chart here, right? So he's showing that here's all the contributions, right? And he shows the different fiscal years and how much aid has been contributed, right? But what he wasn't paying attention to, because Whitney comes back and says, I know you love to try and dunk on me previously over critical comments on Elon Musk, who you love to simp for. But the U.S. did increase funding to Gavi after the WHO withdrawal, and Trump publicly praised Gavi the same month he took the U.S. out of the WHO in 2020, and he promoted the partnership with them. I never claimed U.S. funding for Gavi only started after the WHO withdrawal in 2020. That would be your misleading claim, just so we're clear. So again, probably not the best person to challenge with data. Again, the data matters. And Whitney's really good at this. So like I said, she does have a lot of data to back up what she's discussing. She has a lot of sources. So it goes on here to say the funding that had been for the WHO was used to boost Gavi funding and also helped finance Operation Warp Speed. Good to know that's what you carry water for. Also, others have covered this in detail at the time, like she's talking about Derek Bros. And she says also the last American vagabond. So that was her responding to Alexandros. And you can see the data that she shares here. The U.S. funding of global health strengthens for the jab fight, right? And I'm sorry, this is very small for some reason. And it says it right here. The U.S. has donated 1.16 million more to Gavi, right? And this was June 25th of 2020. So this is from the U.S. Embassy in Georgia. So like I said, she's really good at backing up her data. And this part right here, President Trump provided a statement of support, for Gavi at the public Gavi Pledge Conference hosted by the United Kingdom on June 4th. The other source that she shares here, let me just make this one bigger. US 8.8 billion pledge for Gavi. And it says smashing US 7.4 billion goal. So they went above and beyond their goal. And look who it shows here. So this was April 6th of 2020. And there is Donald Trump. U.S. President Donald Trump makes rare show of global health solidarity in a video message at the Global Jab Summit. So this is why, oh my God. This is why, and I think Walter Kern hosts a show with Matt Taibbi, but this is why it's like, you can't let like your passion or your, I don't know, standing for said politician to blind you from the data that is presented in front of you. It's just like the data that I showed you guys before, that for the people who are blaming Jill Stein for the reason why Kamala Harris lost, the data shows that's not the case. The data shows that even with all of her votes and Cornell's votes and with Claudia votes, Kamala still needs much, much more to still win, that doesn't close the gap. So if you are a Stan, then you might just say, no, I don't care. That doesn't matter. Data doesn't matter. I don't care because this is how I feel. And it's all about my feelings. So if you're standing, sometimes you can overlook the data. Or I don't say overlook it. You don't want to pay attention to it. You're just like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. Right. But what was more interesting to me was that it was like this collaborative effort of them all to just come in, swoon in, and attack her back to back to back. So again, I don't know if they're in a DM group somewhere of just going back and forth with each other, but Whitney doesn't stand for any politician and she doesn't side with either party. In fact, I want you to hear what she said here when I talked to her last time about these two political parties. So this is not someone who supported Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, and she didn't support Donald Trump. Listen to this.
The solutions that we need to look for are local. If people want to look or want to vote for somebody, that's your choice. And I'm not telling you what to do on election day, but unfortunately, Americans and a lot of other people in the world have sort of this nasty habit of thinking that all they need to do in terms of political activism, no matter how bad things are, is just vote once every 4 years and then go back to sleep. And I don't think that is a winning approach at all. So you can vote for whoever you think is the lesser of two evils or whatever, which is what a lot of Americans have been doing for decades now, and expect a different result. But it seems very unlikely that it will result in anything different. And like you said, I think local organizing locally and building resilient local communities is really the only way forward, because the government is too corrupt and they're not going to come save you in the next crisis. Instead, during the next crisis, they will try and impose more surveillance and control over your lives and steal your money to transfer it to the oligarch class.
So did everybody hear that? If you haven't seen that interview that I did with Whitney, make sure you watch that. Get some popcorn because it's really good. Like, she goes through a lot of things. She does talk about Peter Thiel. She talks about like the transfer of money and how these politicians are in bed with a lot of these billionaires, especially Trump, who is a billionaire, right? So she's really good with that. So this is why I wanted you to hear that, because I wanted you guys to understand she's not a political stand. Her job is to expose the truth. Her job is to uncover corruption. That's what Whitney Webb does. And when you are an investigative journalist like that, and you're trying to expose the truth, like she did about Jeffrey Epstein, she wrote books about this. When you're trying to do that, you kind of can't really stand for a politician, because then that means that you would be favorable to that one that you're standing for. So, people seem to like her until like when she criticizes Trump, then it's like the Trump supporters or people on the right have a problem with her. When she calls out corruption about Biden or the Clintons, then it's all of a sudden Democrats have a problem with her. So she can't win. But that's what a real investigative journalist does, right? Like, you're going to call out corruptions on all sides. It doesn't matter what political party it's a part of. But what is happening is a lot of people have once again looked at someone like who Trump's the president now, and they're like, this is our hero. This is the person that's coming to save us. And Whitney is trying to get you to pump the brakes on that. And is trying to tell you, this is not what you think it is. And I think when you stand, you don't like hearing that. And the data is like right in front. Oh my gosh. So we always say protect Whitney, don't we, on the show? We always say like protect Whitney Webb because she has uncovered, a lot of things, especially about Jeffrey Epstein. And you got to protect people like that, because people will see her as that's someone that the establishment will view as dangerous. People say the establishment views Bernie Sanders as dangerous. And I said, if they thought Bernie was dangerous, he wouldn't be in the Senate. They're more likely to view someone like Whitney Webb as dangerous because she's calling out corruption on all sides. So there's that. The Oracle said, see, folk were just supposed to be cheering over withdrawal from the WHO. No one was supposed to connect the dots to Gavi. That's why they're hot with Whitney. They're like, damn you burst the bubble. You burst the bubble. Ryan says, Sabby Sabs, people should know better than to come after customers with receipts. Oh my God. Lauren says, but Sabby, the truth doesn't matter. Dwayne says, it was a great interview, Sabs. Thank you. And the Oracle, focus done through the lit match. Yeah, they were not happy about that. God forbid. You can't criticize. You can't criticize the stand. And that's true. New York Varsity, people pulling out of the WHO is not a bad thing. Don't get it twisted. That's true. And I don't even think that's what Whitney was saying. I think she was just trying to tell people, yeah, he did this before, but then also this, he put that into Gavi afterwards. So yeah. Okay. Based. Can we get the comment on Rockfin? Thank you. Thanks, Roger. Despite never benefiting from these programs, I see opportunity for this and affirmative action in colleges being taken away. These things only existed so that we can come into institutions not owned by our own community. This will force us to build our own institutions. Makes no sense. We own no industries for HBCU grads to transition to working for. We must own our own supply chains. Obviously, he don't know how Cam got here. It's not what you know, but who you know or who you blow. What? You guys are bad tonight, man. The whole thing of brown nosing exists in a capitalist economy where the business model is hierarchical and you climb that ladder. Transition to a cooperative based economy where the hierarchical model is collapsed. So there is no one kiss up to. You have to build and cooperate with others. Yeah. That's why I like the horizontal model where no one's at the top. We're all on the same level, right? I like that. Okie dokie. We're moving on to the final story. Go ahead and pull this up here. This is something that I think the left should spend more time discussing a little bit. And it's not just about Gloria Steinem. It's about the second wave of feminism and how that impacted the civil rights movement and what effect that had on Black women. You see, a lot of times people like to praise Gloria Steinem. And I wish people would stop doing that. When we talk about that second wave of feminism, what we have to understand is that, in my opinion, based on the evidence that I've seen, Gloria Steinem's second wave of feminism actually hurt the civil rights movement. I would also say that it was harmful towards Black women as well. We'll get into all of that. And I'm also going to dive into how I think this impacted the family unit, in particular for Black women. So Gloria Steinem was on the Griot. Even on the Griot, they interviewed Gloria Steinem, and she was talking a little bit about feminism. I want you to hear this.
An event. The question I had for you, I was reading your book. You said that in the March on Washington, you met a Black woman named Mrs. Green, and she brought up...
With an E, Mrs. Green with an E.
Green with an E.
Right.
She brought up the fact that Black women were, in many ways, the reason why the march happened, but so many weren't given the opportunity to speak. Why was that such a profound moment for you? What did you learn in that moment about Black women?
Well, she was seeing with eyes that I did not yet have. I mean, I was there just as, I didn't have any job or thing to do there. I was just one of thousands of people. This was the Martin Luther King March, and I was looking at the same platform she was, And she was seeing that there were no women speaking, and she was angry.
And you have friends like Maxine Waters, Dorothy Pittman Hughes, Flo Kennedy. What have Black feminists taught you?
Feminism. I mean, even before that, I remember I was working with the National Welfare Rights Organization, and they did the first feminist analysis of social policy I'd ever seen. They looked at welfare policy and did a wonderfully funny treatment of it as a gigantic husband that was jealous and looked under your bed for the shoes of other men and kept you on, hardly any money. Like, I mean, it was very funny and very sharp. So, after that, I began to think about doing, taking a feminist look at all social policy. And Fannie Lou Hamer, for instance. I helped to interview Fannie Lou Hamer for the ACLU when Ruth Ginsburg there had a project against the forced sterilization of mostly women of color, of course, and especially Black women. And because that had happened to Fannie Lou, her interview was very important to the case. Fannie Lou was, we know, of course, that she was the great civil rights leader. But what we don't know, that she was also a great feminist who was a leader and a pioneer on reproductive freedom, which means the freedom to have or not to have children, to make that.
Let's pause right there at reproductive freedom. This is where we need to dive in. Let me let her finish. Hold on.
Decision. She had been sterilized in a Mississippi hospital when she went in for a completely different procedure without her knowledge. And she was very conscious of the fact that this happened to her at the same time that white women had to have, I think, 4 children and their husbands' written permission to have a sterilization of their own free will, And also she was a founder of the National Women's Political Caucus. Now, in the history books,
we'll stop there because there's a couple of things I want to get into about Gloria Steinem. Obviously about the CIA part, I'll get to that in just a second. But I want to touch on something else that she said here. Apparently, no movement is perfect. And that includes the civil rights movement. And in the civil rights movement, according to Gloria Steinem, apparently there were disagreement among, some of the women and the men, because some of the women weren't happy that none of the women were allowed to speak on the stage at the march in Washington. So Gloria Steinem tells you here that she learned feminism from Black women. But as you go on, you notice and you see, even in my history books when I was in school, even though she learned that from Black women, Gloria Steinem became the face of the second wave of feminism. And her type of feminism did not benefit Black women, and it harmed the civil rights movement. I really want to have women understand this, especially if you're white women and you're listening. When you don't center other people, let me bring this up here. We'll bring up the CIA part first. When you don't center other people, which this was intentional, by the way, oftentimes what happens is that our views are pushed to the bottom of the list or they're not touched at all. So let's get into a little bit about her role as a spy, right? Some people know about this. Some people don't. Gloria Steinem's new book, My Life on the Road, recounts her life's journeys and travels. Early reviews and profiles reveal incredible detail of Steinem's barrier-breaking feminist role, liberal politics, romances, proclivities, and lifestyle. What is often missed or mischaracterized, however, is the work she did as a CIA agent. Steinem was a spook. CIA agents are tight-lipped, but Steinem spoke openly about her relationship to the agency in the 1950s and 60s after a magazine revealed her employment by a CIA front organization, the Independent Research Service. So, of course, it's not uncommon for the CIA to have these organizations that go under another name, right? And she doesn't, at the time, she didn't deny that. But she was a spy. I'm going a little bit more here and say, while popularity palored because of her paymaster, Steinem defended the CIA relationship, saying, in my experience, the agency was it was liberal, nonviolent, and honorable. So let's get to the civil rights movement, shall we? The CIA spied on Dr. King. The CIA spied on Dr. Martin Luther King. And it says it right here. It says here, let me make it a little bit bigger. U.S. World News in brief. CIA spied on Dr. King. The CIA spied on Dr. King in the 1960s through informants, gathered records of King's telephone calls, and photocopied some of his credit card receipts and messages scrawled on business cards. According to documents in federal lawsuit, the documents disclosed and obtained by the Los Angeles Times contain discussions of how allegedly derogatory information about King could be used to discredit him as a civil rights leader. One CIA informant suggested that King be removed as a Black leader. So, you have Gloria Steinem, who was a spy for the CIA, and the CIA was spying on Dr. King. You have women that were a part of the civil rights movement, Black women that were dissatisfied that Black women weren't allowed to speak on the stage at the March on Washington. And some of those women also participated in Gloria Steinem's second wave of feminism. Why was this an issue? My theory is that Gloria Steinem's second wave of feminism was a distraction from the civil rights movement. This is not to say that I'm against women's rights, that I'm against women having equality. No, that is not true. But at the same time, when you have a movement, it is very important that you're not splitting resources and you're not splitting the people. Now, all of a sudden, the Black women, some of the Black women that were part of the civil rights movement, now they're splitting their time between movements. Because you see, somewhere along the way, Gloria Steinem's feminism had convinced them, you know, you also have to fight for your rights as a woman, not just for the Black community. But Gloria Steinem's feminism was different than what Black women were trying to do. When Black women were fighting for feminism, they were fighting for their entire community. Gloria Steinem's feminism was fighting for the right for mainly affluent white women to work alongside white male counterparts, right? To burn your bras, and then, of course, the reproductive rights. The problem that you run into is that you pick one or the other, because what happens is now you have a Black woman who's participating in the civil rights movement, also participating in the feminist movement. So she's fighting for her rights as a woman under a movement that really was not centering Black women's issues. It was centering the issues that affluent white women wanted to talk about. So while some of those white women were advocating for the right to work in these environments alongside other white male counterparts, a lot of Black women were already working. So it's like you're fighting for the right to be alongside white men in these environments, and you don't even have to work, but we have to work. We'll get into the class issue about this in just a second. But this part right here, feminist icon Gloria Steinem was an anti-communist CIA operative who kept the feminist movement from discussing class, only gender. And then I'll get to the racial part as well. Because see, this is a problem. And this is Gloria. This is who a lot of people love to praise. And she was so great, yada, yada. But when it comes to the class issue, listen to this part. We already talked about the CIA thing. You guys know about that. But I want to get to this. Socialism, not on Gloria's watch. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Gloria's aversion to socialism. She saw it as the ultimate buzzkill for feminism. Why bother discussing economic equality when you can focus on breaking glass ceilings and burning bras? Forget about the working class struggle. Gloria had more pressing matters, like ensuring that women could have it all. Who needs universal health care when you've got a killer highlighter game? And this is a missing part, a big, big missing part, because the Black women that decided to fight alongside Gloria Steinem were not in the same class, for the most part, as Gloria Steinem. So if you're fighting for reproductive rights, how are you not fighting for giving everybody health care as well? Because people like Gloria probably already had it. The Black women that are fighting with you needed things like health care. It wasn't just about the right to, decide whether or not you wanted to have a child. That costs money. You still need health care. So why was there no class struggle that was a part of this movement? And that is because it was never supposed to get to that level. If you look at the civil rights movement, even Dr. King towards the end started to organize the workers in Alabama. He started talking about the class issue as well. Even Dr. King said, we're going to talk about reparations when we go to DC, we're coming to get our check. Even Dr. King started talking about the class issue. And then after that, they killed Dr. King. So if you have women that are a part of your movement that were also part of the civil rights movement, which was also starting to talk about the class struggle, how could you not talk about class along with feminism? Because once you start to bring in the economic perspective, a lot of the affluent white women that were a part of the second wave of feminism, it doesn't apply to them because they're in a different class. She wasn't really trying to help women get to where they needed to get to. This is what people have to grasp from this. At the end of the day, the women, the Black women who were alongside Gloria Steinem, they still had to go back to neighborhoods. They still had to deal with Jim Crow laws. They still had to deal with redlining. They still had to deal with, you talk about healthcare, you talk about reproductive rights. They still had to deal with the fact that Black women have the highest rate of maternal death in the US still today. That's been an ongoing issue. They still had to deal with that. And Gloria Steinem's feminism did not center those issues because she was not affected. In order to have an effective movement for people who are marginalized, you have to center the marginalized positions. You have to center those issues. That wave of feminism did not do that. And of course, also Susan B. Anthony's first wave of feminism also didn't do that. It excluded Black women. Let's go on a little bit more here. He goes on to say the gender versus class debacle. So this is where we get into this part. Gloria wanted feminism to be all about gender, not class, because nothing screams empowerment like ignoring the systemic economic disparities that disproportionately affect women of color, right? Let's raise our champagne flutes to the audacity of it all. Who cares if the working class women can't afford healthcare or decent childcare or decent healthcare? As long as we're smashing patriarchy, the rest is just background noise. Lucy moves the football. So let's get to that part. Or did I get to that part yet? Because they do mention one of the things that she did right was founding Miss Magazine. But I was trying to get to the football part. Maybe I passed it already. Oh, I haven't gotten to that one yet. Okay, that gets to this one. Okay. While feminism failed to deliver progress for Black women, and this is another part, right? So when you look at feminism, and especially that second wave, Many people assume the women's movement uplifts all women because, after all, birds of a feather flock together. However, looks can be deceiving. The women's movement historically prioritized the needs of white, affluent women, denigrating Black women. Feminism failed to address the unique intersection of sexism and racism Black women experience. The agenda prioritized strengthening women's liberties as opposed to universal civil rights for Americans. This is another thing. Black women cannot separate their womanhood from their race. Society pulls Black women in two different directions, each with a unique magnetic force. They fought alongside white feminists throughout history to improve women's lives alongside Black men to make advances in the Black community. Black women lack the resources to land a full-throated fight against sexism while ignoring the role of systemic racism. White women have the privilege of never needing to consider their race when fighting for their rights. Likewise, Black men never have to fear their sex holding them back socioeconomically. This is what people have to get. So there were also times when white feminists supported white racism, and the Black women were left standing by on their own. This is why when you see that women's march, the women's march after Trump won in 2016, look around, you notice you didn't see that many Black people out there. You don't see that many Black women. This is why we don't raise our hand to sign up and volunteer for those types of things, because of the way that feminism has done Black women in the past. We are not centered in the movement. Our issues are not centered in the movement. And Gloria Steinem is no different. This woman's face was all throughout my history books as the woman of feminism, Gloria Steinem this and Gloria Steinem that. And the issues that she was fighting for, were they really beneficial for Black women? I don't think so. It goes on to say here, we'll get into Lucy holding the football, because I think this is the part. Here it is. Lucy holding the football. White women are like Lucy from the iconic Peanuts comic strip. Fans will remember she repeatedly held the football, encouraging him to run towards her and kick it. Each time Charlie Brown ran, building up speed, only to be disappointed because Lucy yanked the ball away at the last minute. Black women are the Charlie Brown of the women's movement because white feminists often offer an olive branch, but instead give toxic oleander. Instead of deliverables, Black women receive stagnation and neglect. So there's Lucy moving the football. And here's an example here. While both Black and white women sought advancement, they did so for different reasons. Their methods of expanding rights reflect this disparity. In the aftermath of the Civil War, many white suffragists attempted to gain rights equal with their fathers, husbands, and brothers. However, Black women fought to secure rights to improve their lives in their communities. This part is also incredibly important. And then in this article, they go into the suffragettes, and this part right here about the failure. The feminist movement failed to account for the different ways in which Black and white women view patriarchy. Under white-dominated male governance, Black and white women suffered many indignities. However, discriminatory practices prevented Black men from gaining power. Thus, comparing white patriarchy to Black patriarchy is like comparing apples to oranges. While it is true that Black men benefit from the male-dominated system, their benefit is significantly less than white men and works in different ways. So this is what I'm going to say about this. The example that I want to bring to you is that fight that Gloria Steinem had, we're going to fight for the right to work in the workplace alongside our white male counterparts. We're going to fight for the rights to burn our bras. We're going to fight for the rights and all those kind of things. That style of feminism was always trying to align itself with white patriarchy. It was always trying to align itself to be in the same position as white men. Black women were trying to fight for the entire community. So while Gloria Steinem is out there saying, let's go fight for the right to work with these guys and Black women were already working. In other words, that wasn't for us. That style of feminism was not for us. Alice Walker even criticizes this. She came up with her own term. She decided to call it womanism. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say this was not for us. And then I got to talk about the family dynamic. Believe what you want to believe, but we got to go down this angle. Because you see, well, during that wave of feminism, like telling women, we got to fight for our reproductive rights, which I agree. Yes, that's a healthcare issue. But a lot of those women that were white feminists, they still went on to either they already had husbands or they went on to have a husband. Even Gloria Steinem got married eventually, had families. This was not a good message for Black women. How did this affect Black women down the line? We can point to someone like Terry McMillan. Terry McMillan, who wrote Waiting to Exhale, How Stella Got a Groove Back. Terry McMillan, at that point in time, her books were kind of known for telling Black women, you can do it on your own. You can be successful, educated. You don't need a man. Was that the right thing to say? Was that the right angle to go down to tell Black women they don't need a man? And then some women, they look around and they're in their 40s and they say, man, I changed my mind about this. I really do wish I would settle down with someone or whatever. Maybe I do want to. And then it's kind of too late because then some guys ain't really trying to date you when you're a certain age and all that kind of jazz, etc. And I think it's one thing to say that you don't need a man. But the question that I want you to ask, what did this do to the family dynamic for Black women? While the white women were standing there, the feminist movement telling you that we need to fight alongside to work next to the white men, remember, they never walked away from the family dynamic. And I just don't know if that was great for our community. And maybe some people say, may not agree, but I don't know if that was a great idea because I have to say this. When I watched Waiting to Exhale back in the day, and at the end of the movie, I see all the women ended up alone. I'm like, okay, they dated guys weren't good for them. They ended up alone. And then one of the women who was pregnant also ended up alone. I felt like the message that Terry McMillan was trying to send is that as a woman, you can do it all on your own. Okay, great. But why aren't we sending a message to keep the father in the home? And I don't want people to even think this is not even a right-wing talking point, but I'm just going to be real with you right now. There is nothing like having the dad in the home. I grew up in a 2-parent household. Some of my cousins did not. And even they will tell you the difference. So sometimes I wonder if that type of feminism was actually good for Black women. And I don't think it was. And when I look at the impact it had on the civil rights movement, I'm very concerned by that. And I'm very concerned by that because you have two movements now happening at the same time. And when that all started, now Gloria Steinem was able to make the case that white women were also marginalized. And now that white women were also marginalized, now they can be a part of affirmative action. Does everybody see how this works? So now you have added other people to our struggle. And since you added other people to our struggle, what that means is that our needs, once again, are going to be pushed to the bottom of the list. I just told you that the DEI, so-called DEI hires that happened at my previous employer were white women, not Black people. Gloria Steinem's second wave of feminism was able to prove that white women were also marginalized. Then we have this term minorities. So now it's not just about Black people fighting for civil rights. Now it's, oh, we got to help white women too. So there have been many times when I say, yes, she was a CIA op. She worked for the CIA. I felt like Gloria Steinem was thrown in to take the attention off of the civil rights movement, to derail it from us getting what we really should have gotten, which was reparations to begin with in the first damn place. I feel like that's what that really was about. Now, you'll see it here. It says, from feminism to family values, how white women left Black women behind. And there are a number of examples of this. Just one I want to get to here. One part here. This part. It says the retreat of white women from feminist solidarity has left Black women grappling with compounding challenges. Systemic issues such as mass incarceration, economic disenfranchisement, and healthcare disparities have devastated Black communities, contributing to low marriage rates and fractured family structures. What did I just tell you guys? Low marriage rates and fractured family structures. Now add feminism, or Gloria Steinem's feminism, to that. So Black women are the least likely to get married. Do you guys know this? In the United States, Black women are the least likely to get married. And not saying everybody has to get married, but there's something to say about that. The rent, not race. Look at this. The crux of white women's retreat from liberal feminism lies not in a rejection of racial equality, but in an urgent response to economic instability. While Black women often preach independence and embrace the mantra of "I don't need a man," remember I was telling you that? Influenced by feminist narratives, white women were focused on ensuring their sons would someday become heads of household with wives and families to support. For many white women, the stability of their children's futures, particularly their sons, has been a central concern. They view financial security as essential to fulfilling these traditional roles, reflecting the societal structures they grew up with and still value. When you look at the way that people voted, people moved as a unit. Obama stood up there and he pointed his fingers at Black men and said, "Problem is you brothers." But the numbers showed very clearly that white women were moving along with their partner when it came to voting, that white women and white men heavily showed up to support Donald Trump. They were continuing to move as a unit. So here, one more part I want to add as well. It says the independent Black women thought they were building alongside white women in solidarity against patriarchal structures. But in reality, it's a divergence in both experiences and objectives. As Black women celebrated self-reliance, they were unaware that many white women were simultaneously reinforcing traditional gender roles with their own families, particularly their sons. This misalignment has left Black women grappling with systemic inequities and fractured alliances, navigating a reality starkly different from the solidarity they once believed they shared. So Alice Walker changed it. Alice Walker saw that there were issues with this type of feminism. And so what Alice Walker said is that womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender. Alice Walker. It says here that she changed it. She came a different word. Alice Walker Black feminist poet, author, and activist coined the term womanist in her book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, Womanist Prose. Womanism, or Black feminism, offers a space for Black feminists who have been erased from our own labor for the mainstream feminist movement, which often centers white cis women who are seeking to be equal to white cis men. So Alice Walker decided to come up with a whole different word and said, we are going to go with womanism. And this is the message that I've been trying to get across to people when we have movements. When you don't, and you can say this with the progressive movement too. I still thought that Bernie Sanders should have had a reparations plan. When you are not willing to center the issues of those who are the most marginalized that are a part of your movement does not serve those people. And in some ways, it can hurt those people. And that is what happened with Gloria Steinem's feminism movement. Oh, thank you, Money Making Bear. I'm so glad you brought this up. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So what we have to understand is that at the end of the day, for the most part, even with that feminist movement, white women were not willing to break up the family dynamic. They were not willing to break up the family unit. Yet you got people out here telling Black women you can do it all by yourself and you don't need to have a man. So I think we need to seriously think about how we form movements, how we structure movements, particularly within this country. Maybe I need to do a separate episode about Terry McMillan, because I've read a lot of her books. Lana says young college women could be duped until they got out into society. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I just think, what's wrong, FM? Why did white women do this, Sabby? Well, I think, again, all in all, people are looking out for their interests, right? Like a lot of times the first thing that comes to your mind is what's going to help you, not what's going to help your neighbor, what's going to help your buddy. And then there are some nefarious reasons. Some may have done this to break up the family. You guys can come up with your own conclusions. But my message to everybody is this. I think that there is something incredibly strong about having the two-parent household. I know sometimes things don't work out. People get divorced, not trying to shame nobody. If you're a single parent, not trying to shame you. But I think the message that was kind of sent out, especially like, I feel like in the 90s, that like, oh, you could just go ahead, just take care of that baby by yourself or whatever. That was not a positive message. And I think back to even Terry McMillan, and I get what she was trying to do to tell people that get your education, you can be smart. I get it. At the same time, I don't think that was the best message to send out into the community. So the Gloria Steinem thing, I think people really need to understand this, that this woman did not look out for our best interest. She did not. She looked out for the interest that benefited her. And she even told you, she even said, well, I got feminism from Black women, but why was she the face of it? She was the face of it because that's who they wanted to be the face of it. And I think you know who I mean when I say they. That's who they wanted to be the face of it. Just like I told you about Rosa Parks, right? Rosa Parks wasn't the first person not to give up her seat. She was selected because the other woman that it happened to, number one, they said that she was pregnant and she was a teenager. And number two, they said her complexion was too dark. They pick who they want these people to be. Gloria Steinem was chosen. Yes, Danny, they. Yes. And this is why a lot of times you'll see when a lot of these movement happens, this is why a lot of times Black people, not as many of us get involved. Because the moment we say, well, we got to deal with these issues, blah, blah, blah. No. Let's not focus on that. Let's just no. Oh, thanks, Lana. You got it right, Sabby. Oh, thank you. But they do this. They pick who they want your people. So it's like, again, you look into a lot of these people and you'll realize some of these people were chosen. They tell you who your leader is going to be. They tell you who your movement leader is going to be. And that's something I think we can all kind of agree on. But from what I've seen and from what I read, Gloria Steinem's wave of feminism hurt the civil rights movement because it took Black women from the civil rights movement and put it into a feminist movement that didn't even benefit white women. It didn't even benefit Black women. And it made white women a minority. Something to think about. Something to think about, folks. All right. I think that's it for me, right? We got a comment on Rockfin. Eric, I think. Thank you. Thanks, Roger. Look how they tricked Black women to replace them in their jobs. Black women were already working. Fighting for someone to replace you, you ultimate psyop. Same thing that happened with BLM, which got turned into Black Trans Matter when those from the LGBTQ community replaced the original members before Soros started funding BLM. Black people who knew what time it was stopped messing with BLM at its height. Yeah, there are a lot of things that happen with BLM, dude. And thank you for this one. This is but one story out of many where FBA history are coming down on the wrong side of movements when we help others with their movement, only to turn around to see that we're holding the short end of the stick left, holding the evidence where those we helped don't turn back to help. Maybe this will help the left understand why our community was not interested in coming out during Palestine protests. Interesting. I saw Black people at Palestinian protests, but I hear what you're saying. Comments over here. Okay. Thank you for the super sticker, Maureen. Thank you, Jasmine. What burns me up about feminists like her is that their divisive gender politics stagnated progress with sexism Black women tried to make. There you go. Ty Richardson, Black women couldn't get into the same room as Gloria. You guys see this? The Oracle, Steinem was collaborating with the enemy. Exactly. Thank you, Kenny. Bell Hook's book, Ain't I a Woman, talks a lot about white feminists. Thanks, Focus. Rich whites like Gloria are always the first to talk about class reductionism. Thanks, Jasmine. That's why divorcing class from gender was so nefarious, especially for Black women. But because we made our own strides, those affluent white women envied us and divided our community. Thanks, Casey. Bras are expensive. I never got that part. I never got that part either. Thank you, Egg. Some say that suffragettes got started not because they wanted the same rights as white men, but because they saw Black men getting rights before them. Ooh, that's a good point there, Egg. Thanks, Baby Ethernet. Beautiful show, Sabby. Love, you are the future of media. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Satra. My experience with white professors kept their families intact, while having their Brokeback Mountain lifestyle in front of students and with students. Okay. Damn, Satra. Thank you, Jasmine. That's why I'm a womanist too. Also, In Search of Our Mother's Garden is a good read. Elaine says, just joined and saw Gloria Steinem being discussed. Hope someone mentioned that she dated billionaire Mort Zuckerman for 4 years in the late 1980s, early 1990s. Super wealthy fake feminism. There you go. I wasn't going to get into all the dating stuff, but yeah. And then she got married. She married Christian Bale's father. Thank you, Baby Ethernet. This is critical thinking. We appreciate you, boo. Thank you. Okay, don't let me forget about the poll. Yay. Last time I forgot about the poll. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Why do you feel CNN ratings declined? We have 2,000. Oh no. Sometimes it disappears, you guys. I don't think it did. Oh, did it not disappear this time? What happened? Okay. Why do you feel CNN ratings decline? We have 2,193 votes. 6% said Kamala lost. 49% said CNN lies a lot. 1% said Trump lost in 2021. And 44% said all of the above. That's close between CNN lies a lot actually got more than all the above. But that is close. 49% and 44%. Wow. I'm still laughing that CNN wants to do paid subscription service. Why would... Anywho, all right, guys. Thank you, Laugh66. Great work on feminism. I think also men should not call themselves feminists. Men have no right to signal their righteousness that way. I didn't know men were calling themselves feminists, but interesting. All right, guys. That's it for me. I will see you guys live tomorrow night. I have a group coming on that they're working on a pretty important the reparations commission in Massachusetts here. So it looks like they got this up and running. I don't know how they did it, but they're going to come on tomorrow night. And then I have a couple news stories that we need to discuss as well, because things are getting crazy. Like ever since Democrats lost this election, everything is coming out, man. Everything is coming out. So I got a wild story for you tomorrow, booze. Okay, that's it for you guys. Have a good night. Keep up the fight. Woohoo!